Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support the work that I do by donating. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. You can also be a paid member to my Patreon channel and my Substack channel. That way, you are supporting the free work that I do to give you my opinion about certain subjects that are happening, also my analysis on the financial markets. And if you've been paying attention to my broadcast, you will also learn how to slow down the aging process and boost up your immune system. Super important, especially during the fall and the winter season. So please go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support the work that I do. Share the links, follow me on X and on GETTR. You can also follow me on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble, Podomatic, and Apple Podcast. On my website, I have live streams and archive material for the audio version of my podcast. So please go under broadcast, radio, or broadcast live. With that said, let's go to Mark Levin.
Welcome back, America. It's propitious that we have our friend Lee Stefanik with us to talk about New York City, and beyond. Lee Stefanik, a radical Marxist, Islamist, Jew-hating, America-hating mayor is what New York City is going to have. He was endorsed by your governor, Hochul, and it seems to me that really the only check left on him is going to be the governor, who would lead both politically, rhetorically, and legally to try and slow him down or stop him in some respects. How can Hochul do that if she endorsed him and helped him get elected?
Well, first of all, Kathy Hochul, when the state was looking for leadership, Kathy Hochul bent the knee to this raging, defund the police, anti-Semite communist who wants to raise taxes. And you and I both know, Mark, New York is already the most unaffordable state in the nation because of Kathy Hochul's failed leadership. We have the highest taxes, we have the most burdensome regulation, we have the highest energy costs, highest utility costs, highest grocery costs. It is up to the governor to provide a check on Mamdani, and that is not what Kathy Hochul did. She propelled him. And the reality is, for a Democrat nominee, even though Mamdani is a registered socialist, he won the Democrat primary, but barely broke 50%. That means that nearly half of New York City opposes his radical policies. Kathy Hochul has stated that she will be a check, but yet it took her less than 24 hours to say that she's open to raising taxes. And this is a governor who has a record of raising taxes, whether it's the congestion pricing scheme, which is a tax hike on hardworking New Yorkers. And I'll tell you, Mark, New York is the most unaffordable state. Republicans, Democrats, and independents know it, and they know it's because of Kathy Hochul and 2 decades of Democrat failed rule.
Well said. Now, as for this guy Mamdani, who the only thing he's ever run is his mouth, quite frankly. He's been backed by Soros. He's been backed by CARE. He's been backed by Linda Sarsour. He's been backed by all kinds of vile people and organizations. He was endorsed by the royal family of Qatar. How do you think this guy got elected? You make a great point. He didn't win a very big election. In fact, the city's 65% Democrat. He still got 52% or 51% of the vote. What do you make of it?
I make of that even registered Democrats in New York State oppose Zoran Mamdani. He won a primary with a low turnout, and this general election, again, he barely broke 50%. That means people want common sense. And you're right to point out, Mark, in terms of he has allied himself with the unindicted co-conspirator of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing that killed New Yorkers. He has stood with the pro-Hamas voices. He has failed to condemn them. And this is a city with the largest population of Jewish families outside of Israel. So people are concerned. And less than 24 hours later, we saw a swastika being drawn outside of a yeshiva. I led the effort to call that out, and Kathy Hochul followed my leadership, and she failed to get Zoran Mamdani to condemn this anti-Semitism that is on the rise in New York City. But the key, Mark, is Zoran Mamdani sold a false bill of goods. He talked about affordability, which is the correct issue. However, it is his own party when it comes to increasing the rent, increasing all the cost of living. It's because of radical Democrat-controlled, frankly, socialist-controlled city council in New York City. And it's Republicans who are putting the common sense vision forward that we want to cut taxes. We want to lower energy prices by unleashing energy independence, which Kathy Hochul has crushed in the state of New York. And then the safety is another key topic. Zora Mamdani has said over and over again he wants to defund the police. You're seeing a mass exodus of NYPD officers. And people know that Kathy Hochul embraces defund the police. She supports failed bail reform, which releases criminals onto our streets. So we're going to have a lot to talk about over this next year. And certainly New Yorkers want to check on Zora Mamdani's communism.
You make a lot of great points. I mean, isn't Florida more affordable than New York, the red state versus a blue state? Isn't Tennessee more affordable than California, red state versus a blue state? I mean, I could go on and on down the list. Since when is Marxism affordable? As a matter of fact, Marxism had trouble keeping toilet paper on the shelves and so forth and so on. So New York's in for a rough ride. And my perspective is the vast majority of New Yorkers statewide are looking at this and appalled by this. And I think they're going to want somebody who doesn't go along with it and support it, but who's going to fight it every step of the way.
I can't tell you how many calls I have gotten in the first 24 hours after Mamdani's election of traditional Democrats saying enough is enough. We previously supported Kathy Hochul. She failed us. We know it. And we are looking forward to joining with you to fire Kathy Hochul to save our state once and for all, because people want common sense. They want to focus on addressing the affordability crisis. We will be putting forward solutions. I led the largest middle class tax cut in terms of what we passed in the House. Meanwhile, Kathy Hochul has made it more and more unaffordable for families in New York State.
We'll be right back.
Want even more Fox News on YouTube? Become a Fox News Patriot today. Click join to find out how.
Is the cost of living in cities like New York increasing? Around the world, yes. What's some of the reasons why? Failed socialistic policies locally, but also an overproduction of money supply, an over-reliance of the central bank, an over-reliance of fiscal policy locally and at the federal level that leads to inflation, that leads to higher costs. And some of these socialistic policies that are taking place in the United States, trying to hamper energy production or the way agriculture processing happens, when you add in regulations, it adds to the cost. It can add to the cost in additional fees for the processing of a particular good, or it could suppress supply. And if the demand is inelastic and the supply is less, well, prices go up. So uniquely to New York, there are a lot of housing potentiality through conversion of the commercial real estate into residential real estate. The problem is, even though you have all of this potentiality, the problem is that the regulations prevent one from doing so. And therefore the units aren't online to lower the cost. So there is a regulatory issue. There's a fire code issue. And I think with the structural unemployment that's probably going to be taking place with AI and humanoid robotics in the near future, the haves and the have-nots are going to divide even further. So it's only going to be exacerbated in New York, these problems over time. the answer isn't try to have free this and free that because you are going to have to tax higher. Well, if income levels are not going up relative to inflation, then the purchasing power continues to slowly dwindle away. And that's, I think, what you have been seeing for the last decade or two in the United States. Another part of this problem is that the economic clustering has diminished. If you don't make products in your country, you're not innovating. You don't have the tacit knowledge of being able to improve and the positive externalities that comes out of that tacit knowledge to build up economic clusters. See, people think, oh, manufacturing, well, if you start decimating your manufacturing base, assembling, tool and die industry, you no longer over time have the knowledge to make things. So if an economist says, oh, it's cheaper to make it overseas, yeah, but over time, let's say 20 years, you will lose the base in your country to actually know how to build stuff. The tool and die industry is starting to come back in the United States, but it's only because manufacturing is coming back to the United States. So it's really important to pay attention to economic clusters, tacit knowledge, and socialistic programs. It's a whole mosaic along the landscape that's causing the cost of living to go up. If you lose your economic clustering, economic viability isn't there. When taxes go up or inflation goes up, you have less purchasing power. When you have regulations that suppress your energy production, your prices go up. When you have regulation where you can't put enough housing relative to the need in your society, housing costs go up. So socialistic programs in New York will not work in the long run. Free buses are going to have to be paid somehow. It's going to be through taxation. And so the people that are living in the city are going to have less purchasing power to bolster up some of these freebies. Childcare. Free childcare? Who's going to pay for it? Oh, it's just the rich. Well, what happens if the rich leave? Oh, the rich won't leave. Well, they are. The bottom line is that the middle class is going to be squeezed because the poor can't pay and the rich will leave. So the middle class is going to get squeezed and pay for it. Socialism never works. But it's not just, oh, Mamdani and the Democrats and they're all bad. They are all bad. But the thing is that the problems that we have in the United States have been multiple decades, multiple different types of administrations, Republican and Democrat, that has led to the hollowing out of the American manufacturing base. It's starting to come back, but it's going to take time to build up that tacit knowledge, to build up those supply chains, and to rev back up to what the tool and die industry was in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. But when it does reach a critical mass, there's going to be a lot of jobs, and very high-paying jobs. This is the thing that I have a problem with the economists. When they ship those tool and die jobs, because you get a tool and die is custom. You can't like mass produce it because you need one or two of them to make a lot of parts, right? So a tool is a custom design and is manufactured, and it needs a lot of different talents to make a tool and die for making parts, right? You need benching, you need you need CNC cutting, you need CNC programming, you need part design, you need tool design, you need boring mills, you need spotters, you need injection or stamping machines, you need, you know, cutting dies. There's lots that go into it, and that's just making the tool. Then making an assembly line and designing the assembly line and building the different parts to the assembly line, the stations, the rolling trays, the conveyor belt, the robotics that are involved, programming the robots to move in certain ways. A lot. And these are high-paying jobs. They all went away because the economists said, oh, it's cheap. They only looked at the final assembly, the cost of a worker for the final assembly, but they didn't realize all of the peripheral to get to making a part. I pay attention to Bloomberg almost every day. And these people, they don't know how things are made. They look at it and it's like, well, we don't want workers to just assemble things. That's not where the money is. The money is in making the manufacturing line. The money is maintaining the manufacturing line. The money is in making the robots for the manufacturing line. The money is making the tools that make the parts for the manufacturing line. And the sub-assemblies. Because sometimes the sub-assembly comes onto the final assembly line. So it's sub-assembled by a tier 1 supplier. Economists didn't get this. And so when they promoted shipping jobs overseas, they gutted the tacit knowledge of how stuff is made. And it's a skill, and it's a high-paying skill. Stupid. Don't trust economists. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the charcoal tea tree, the lemongrass, the peppermint, or lavender, and the peppermint. These structural nail silver soaps are great for gifts. They're also great to use during the fall and the winter season. Use them every day. Very high quality, all right? There's no fancy chemicals in here or anything, but they're very, very effective. Made from structural nail silver. Please go to my store, get a few bars of the structural nail silver soap, and use discount 5 and you get $5 off. Another great product that you should be getting to improve your immune system and to take during the fall and winter season is the Max 35. The Max 35 is 35 parts per million. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. You take a teaspoon a day every day. I've been doing this for over 5 years. Now, you take a teaspoon a day, swish in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds or so, and then swallow it. This will improve your mucosal barrier, help with the health of the epithelial lining, especially in your oropharynx, and improve your oral cavity. Now, when you do this regularly, you're boosting up your innate immune system. And when you are boosting up your immune system and you are less sick, you slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, get the Max 35 or the Cleanse, take it every day, but especially during the fall and the winter. And if you are around someone that's not feeling well, or you are not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. Again, swish in your mouth, gargle, and then swallow it. It's very important to be prepared for the fall and the winter season. And lastly, the drops and the lozenges. Get a few bags for your household. They're great for stocking stuffers, but use them when you're not feeling well or you have that throat irritation. Super important, especially during the fall and the winter season. So when you have that throat irritation, take it right away. You can get it in honey and lemon, cherry, blueberry, and you can also get the lozenges in elderberry zinc. Elderberry zinc and the drops, very high quality lozenges and drops. Take them for the fall and winter season, and just be prepared. Have some at home, have some at work. You never know when you need them, but they're very effective. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
All right. Let's go to.
This is about the government
We are
shutdown.
not a traditional cafe. We're completely unconventional. And my website really has to capture the same thing.
He believes some Democrats can break with their party to break the filibuster and finally bring the shutdown to an end. Fox News contributor Joe Concha joins us now. So, Joe, what do you make? I mean, here we are, 40 days. You've had these holdout Democrat senators that have kept the government short. What we're looking at possibly this morning or at some point today is Republicans putting forth a pure spending bill, funds the ag department for SNAP benefits, the VA, and a few other things, but there's nothing in this to extend the Obamacare subsidies.
And therefore, Griff, as you just laid out, the Democrats will probably reject it again. And look, we're getting to a very dangerous aspect of this government shutdown. For the first few weeks, this was something almost all Americans, they didn't feel or they really didn't care about. But now we're seeing travel being impacted in a big way. And our friend Larry Kudlow has been saying recently, we are one plane crash away from this being something that many Americans, all Americans, are going to be apocalyptic about, as far as Democrats not simply voting to open the government as Republicans had 14 times with ACR. And now progressives have to understand here that they don't have any leverage. Elections have consequences. If they want to negotiate on Obamacare, which has only resulted, by the way, in premiums and healthcare costs skyrocketing since it went into law, 15 years ago? Then they should open the government first, negotiate later, because this could end up being a deadly government shutdown in Thanksgiving travel coming up soon. And we simply do not have enough air traffic controllers on the job right now to handle all those planes in the skies.
Yeah, and we've been tracking the cancellations and delays every day. You can see the bug on our screen. We're keeping the viewers updated. But, it's a great point you raised about our friend Larry Kudlow. I was on the show yesterday talking to him about this. And I asked him if he was in support of the filibuster, like Republicans just ending the filibuster altogether. And he thinks ultimately that may have to be the resolution. Obviously, President Trump encouraging Republicans to do it. What say you?
I'm with the 15 Senate Republicans who say, do not do this, Mr. President. Ending the filibuster, yes, it will solve this problem now. But what that's going to lead to, if Democrats get back into power grip, you will see DC and Puerto Rico becoming states. That means four Democrat senators being added to that chamber, probably giving them a permanent majority for our lifetime. When you add four just out of nowhere, they'll expand the Supreme Court where it'll look more like a basketball roster than anything else, where you're going to have all these justices from the left. It's something that if you open up the Pandora's box, it will be weaponized in a way that opening the government's a good thing. Democrats will use it for things that give them permanent power, and that's something that you just do not want to do. It's there for a reason. It's a check and balance to government radically changing on certain policies and certain structures. We'll put it that way.
That is certainly the fear, and President Trump has said Democrats are going to do it anyway, so we might as well break it. But speaking of the commander-in-chief, he will head to the Washington Commanders Detroit Lions game later today. Well, they'll be saluting heroes for Veterans Day. I'm not sure if my Commanders could actually have any hope of beating the Lions right now. They're so injury plagued, but perhaps having the commander-in-chief will help them. But there's a little bit of interesting reporting because ESPN has suggested that President Trump might want the new Commanders Stadium named after him. What do you think?
Wow, that's very Trump-like, certainly, and that could just be President Trump trolling, like he said he wanted to make Canada the 51st state, and I wonder, like, if he's really serious about that. But this is beyond smart for him to go to this game today. As you said, Jaden Daniels is out. The Lions are probably going to blow their doors off like the Seahawks did last week. And they're the Redskins, by the way. I refuse to call them the Commanders, Greg. But 30 million people watched last week's game between the Chiefs and the Bills. That's just a regular season game. That's a much higher audience than the World Series. So President Trump understands this opportunity better than any president we've seen since he's got the Super Bowl, Daytona 500, World Cup final, FIFA here in New Jersey. So it's smart for him to go. It's a big audience, but I think in the end, I think he'd rather see the Redskins name come back than Donald Trump being added to the stadium, if I were to guess.
And that's a great point, Joe. He has certainly spoken about that and supports that. We'll see if it happens. And at the end of the day, the NFL will certainly benefit because having the president there will increase those ratings. Joe Concha, thank you very much. Have a great Sunday.
Thanks, Greg.
All right. I'm Steve Goosey.
I'm Brighteon Channel.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our
This isn't just the start of a shift. It is our promise. For more than 3 decades, Garter will
of the economy. Mickey D is saying that Americans are cutting back, especially younger Americans. And they are not alone. Kava also slashing its sales forecast again. And brands from Coca-Cola to Chipotle, Brian's favorite, say that they're seeing the same thing, a widening gap between customers who are trading down and those who don't have to. The wealthy are spending, but the working class is trimming their value meals. Lou, how do you see this? I was just looking at all the stocks, and I was talking to Charles Payne earlier today. So the retail spider, the XRT, is down 6% in the last month.
Consumer discretionary has not been a
countrywide,
very strong performing sector. It's sending mixed signals about the strength of the consumer. I think this is indicative of that. You're seeing value consciousness. But at the same time, I want to point out, and I know we always bring this up in tandem with these consumer stocks, but GLP-1 drugs are now going to be the best-selling drugs in the country now, outpacing Merck's Keytruda at over 30 billion a year. So think about that. That was a cancer drug. Now there's a weight loss drug. Now you're pairing that with higher costs of food and less consumption. I think this is a trend that you really have to be careful with. Like Chipotle, I don't want to pick on Brian when he's not here.
do it.
But that stock is not just suffering from sensitivity, economic sensitivity. It's suffering from brand staleness and just inconsistency, which is the bellwether of good franchises. It's everything's the same. I think McDonald's is very similar, right? They're going to bring out the value meal. I remember when hamburgers and cheeseburgers were 59 and 69 cents. When they get north and meals are costing $15 to $20, I'm not going to McDonald's.
Can I add on to that? The problem is the price got so expensive, it's no bargain anymore. And if you're a health conscious consumer, which many of our consumers are in America, not everybody, but more are, you also realize since the inflation crisis under Joe Biden, the quality of these cheap places, dining restaurants, the quality's gone down. You're using worse oils, cheaper meats. And so I do think there's a segment of the population sitting back and saying, I'm paying more for this. I'm getting less food and less quality. Maybe there is an alternative, and the cheapest alternative would be packing a snack from home.
We were talking about the stock performance, and I think I was surprised because they introduced about a year ago that $5 meal deal. And it really resonated with a lot of people who felt they needed the value meal to come back because things had gotten so expensive. But Lou, I know we were talking about the stock earlier, hasn't really reflected the extra demand in there. I will end on a light note. McDonald's is trying something really fun. In 500 stores, they're doing a sample test before they roll this out nationwide. Right now it's in Colorado and Wisconsin, and the CEO said in September it's performed really well. They're testing like crafted sodas and refreshers. So there's a vanilla cold brew, a vanilla frappe, a strawberry watermelon refresher, and a popping tropic refresher. So they're trying to use those gimmicks to bring people in.
What will work? You know what will work? I personally think that because of all the AI and all of the tech that's happening, that there is an aesthetic where people will want to gravitate to that is of an older time period. Having an old version of McDonald's And the menu is very basic, just like the original McDonald's. The prices will have to be commensurate to, current price structure. But the whole design of the counter or when you're ordering is just the whole ambiance is as if you're going back in time. Same thing with cars. You can have a cool looking new fresh design that's designed off of the ethos of an older model without all the tech, right? You can still have your power windows, maybe even even electric seats, but just go back to a simpler design. I think a lot of people are going to be looking for this, that they're going to start bringing in new versions of Alexa in their household. They're going to bring in new versions of Siri in their household. They're going to bring in this device from OpenAI with Jonathan Ives. But people are going to actually say, you know what? They want to detect their love. And having a restaurant that is like a throwback to the 50s, I think would actually do well.
When people aren't going in for a breakfast or a lunch, we'll have to see how it does.
You call it Guinness.
Little
I don't
frappe.
ever think of McDonald's brand associated with anything craft and high quality. It's
No?
not, it's value.
But this is
crap.
not about just
McDonald's
restaurant chains and, GLP-1 drugs. Even the consumer staple stocks have not been doing well. And Charles mentioned this, that 32 of the 37 consumer staple stocks are in the red. Only one is up more than 1%. And if you look at in the S&P, they're not performing well, and it does suggest a rolling recession. And I've heard this over and over again, that if not for the spending on the AI data centers, we would be in a recession.
No, that's not true. If you look Q1 of this year, AI data centers accounted for the majority of GDP growth. Q2, you saw pretty much every other segment. This is more a classical rotation in a bull market. Consumer staples should not perform well in a bull market when tech is doing well, when financials are doing well. They do best when we get into a bear market, but it is something to pay attention to. But this is a defensive sector. You'd expect to see this going up as the markets are correcting and on the brink of a bear market. So I think it's indicative of multiple trends. And it's just like trying to put a finger on what's going on with the consumer. We've been doing that for 12, 24 months. There's no clear signal, but it's definitely a concern, because if the consumer rolls over and stops spending, then that's going to be a bad harbinger.
I think the key is in the name, the value meal, and that it's not a value anymore. People don't see fast food as a value. They're sticker shocked actually by it. And so, they're still eating something they have to eat. They're just figuring out, other alternatives for themselves.
There's always the a la carte option of a snack wrap.
Oh,
Like,
That's good. We talk about these new refresher drinks, and one, it seems like they're trying to be like Starbucks, and two, here's actually a simple fix that would attract more customers. Instead of putting out all these refreshers, switch to beef tallow to do your French fries in, right? That's extremely popular among my generation,
absolutely.
especially on social media. So that's one way to bring back that younger generation who's trying to be more health conscious, while giving them your product and making them feel like they're not killing themselves.
At least they haven't tried to update their logo or anything.
Right.
Take my McDonald's coffee cup out of the garbage, but I have at least one black coffee from McDonald's every single day. I buy it through the app because you get a great deal. I have cut back on my Starbucks. I rarely ever go to Starbucks anymore, and I get the McDonald's coffee. Maybe these refreshers will be a cheaper alternative for people. Maybe that's what they're trying to do over, presenting craft drinks like they're something that they're not.
It's not a raging bull market when private credit.
See, here's the problem.
Firms.
Here's the problem with being a publicly traded company, especially in terms of, let's say, McDonald's, a restaurant. All right, you're a franchise, you're making money through franchises, but eventually over time, even if you have a high quality product or a desirable product that gives value, once you reach saturation, you're not going to be able to build that many more franchises. and you can't keep on raising the price to increase revenue for the company. So what happens is that you have to cut the quality. And when you're cutting the quality, right, people start to realize and they stop going. Once you reach saturation during your growth phase, it's very hard to maintain the stock price. Because how do you maintain the stock price or get it to go up? You have to find growth. Where's the growth? Either franchises, new franchises, increasing the price, and or reduce the cost. And what's going to happen is that they're going to continually be bumping up on that saturation point. People are going to say, I don't want to pay for this. The quality's going down, and therefore the stock starts to go down. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. Once they reach saturation, I mean, how many McDonald's restaurants need? There is a fixed number that need to be built. But once you reach that point, once you hit that theoretical point, you really don't, their growth is gone. And that's where McDonald's is. Because they've been around for so long and they've reached out so much, there's not much growth left in McDonald's. So they have to convince the analysts on Wall Street, yeah, we're gonna have these new types of meals and drive new traffic. And then the stock will go up. Really? Is the quality that good? And even if you did get that growth phase, let's say the stock starts to drip down and it goes down 20 or 30%. And they come up with a new gimmick like soda, some sort of soda gimmick. All right? And it's driving traffic, and the analysts are seeing that, that they're going to do a recommendation for buy, and the stock goes up 20% or so. All right? And then people start realizing, well, this soda that they're doing is bad for you, and then they stop going. And then the stock drops again. It's just a gimmick. It's just a gimmick. So this is the problem when you reach saturation in a publicly traded market. So you always have to try to have a gimmick to bring in sales or find ways to cut. And it's a mature business, and people should realize this. This is a mature business, and maybe McDonald's is just really a dividend stock. It's just a dividend stock, and just maintain the share price and try to prevent as much as you can capital depreciation of the corpus. So let's continue.
The toilet,
I agree, that's why they're
Blue Owl is
clamoring, yeah.
down 14% in the last 6 months. I could go on, but I'm just saying that what we're seeing, the spreadsheet killed my sales. Wait, just try typing.
Discover lifetime sales CRM.
Save up to 35% only through Tuesday during Raymore Flanagan's Veterans Day Super Sale.
We're seeing the consumer companies and restaurant chains saying is showing up in stocks.
There's
well.
cracks. The private credit, you've been early on that, and I think you've been dead right. The fact that they want to get access to 401k money to bail them out is really the bridge. So I think it's a terrible idea. It's a sign of weakness to come.
Yeah.
But not yet.
I might have been out for a long time, but to me, coming back, it feels like there's more and more talk than I've heard in a while about the K-shaped economy. And Dagan, I think you alluded to this, the top 10% are spending half of it, or supporting half of the spending. And I feel like the bottom half in that K-shaped recovery is getting worse and worse. And we could bring this back to the election, right? We could debate on whether socialism is the answer to that, but affordability seems top of mind more than it's ever been.
These are the lingering effects of inflation, right? The wage growth was just enough to keep ahead of inflation so that you can maintain your level. But we haven't seen, as inflation's cooled, wage growth accelerate, where the average American is doing better. They're just not.
We're waiting for
Inflation
the,
cooled, the prices stayed up, they never
Correct.
came down.
It's the rate of change, yeah, correct.
Brianna, we're waiting for the one big beautiful bill to kick in.
Yeah, and I feel like Republicans have a very short window. You know, they have 1 year that they have power to not only work to actually bring the prices down, where people can feel it, because egg prices are down, gas prices are down. And I do think there's a big disconnect. I saw on CNN the other day, someone said, well, egg prices are still up. And Scott Jennings had to say, actually, they're statistically down. So there's a disconnect with the messaging that Republicans are doing that they need to get on board with before 2026. And there's other things like with the big beautiful bill that are going to take some time to be implemented, and it might be too late.
I heard somebody on Instagram refer to with Mamdani getting elected as the mayor, it's still going to turn into an economy in New York City of people who either order DoorDash or deliver DoorDash.
Yeah.
You're looking at
I
Pinterest.
can't afford the delivery fees.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the digestive enzyme complex. Digestive enzyme complex will help to break up your proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids, bring down the stress in your pancreas. When you get older, your pancreas doesn't work as well. It's really important to reduce that stress. So please go to my store and get the digestive enzyme complex, break up those carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Digestive enzyme complex also has bromelain, and bromelain is fibrinolytic. Vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex will boost up your ATP levels because the first 4 B vitamins helps with the electron transport chain to produce ATP. Your cells will perform better, your cellular metabolism will be better, and vitamin B complex will protect your neurons. Super important to protect your neurons. And I've been saying, because of the aftershock of 2020, 30% of the people that you know that are 40 years of age or older within the next 5 years will develop early onset of dementia. Now, the severity of it will depend on individuals, but 75% of the 30% are going to end up having ischemic dementia, microclotting, microbleeding. So this is the reason why it's so important to protect your cardiovascular health. 24.9% of the 30% will develop amyloidosis, or building up a plaque. This is the reason why it's so important to keep the inflammation down and soak up free radicals. And about 0.1% to about 0.5% will end up getting prion disease, which is a subset of amyloidosis. So it's really important to protect your neurons. So please go to my store and make sure you get the vitamin B complex. And take the other supplements that will help with your cardiovascular health. Because the bulk of the problem with the early onset of dementia will be due to plaque buildup due to inflammation and cardiovascular problems. Olive leaf extract will bring down inflammation and help with your lipid profile. By bringing down inflammation and bringing down the LDL, increasing your HDL levels, you're reducing plaque formation. Super important for your cardiovascular health. And olive leaf extract, by bringing down inflammation, will boost up your immune system. And that's going to be really important for the fall and winter season. So please go to my store, get the vitamin B complex, the digestive enzyme complex, and the olive leaf extract as a stack, powerful stack. You're helping to protect your neurons. You're helping with your pancreatic health and your digestion. And the olive leaf extract is helping with your immune system and your cardiovascular system. Please go to my store, use discount 5. It's all caps, discount 5. You get $5 off. Click the link in this video, go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's talk about tariffs.
Oh. I was appalled at the justices. Now, not a single justice has ever been a business person. None of them. We're talking about commerce here, right? There's 9 lawyers on the Supreme Court. All lawyers, they worked in law firms, they've been professors, they've been lower court judges. Some of them have worked in the Reagan administration, some of them worked in the Obama administration, whatever. But by experience, they have no relevant experience. That by itself is not intellectually disqualifying, but it became apparent to me as I was watching the nature of the questions that were asked of the Solicitor General of the United States, that most of these justices don't have a clue. Again, they're lawyers who have been lawyers their whole life, which is fine. I thought most of the questions were intellectually lazy, if not embarrassing, and mostly political, ideological, and even sophomoric. Now, let me be specific. Let's start with Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts. He insisted again and again that a tariff is a tax, pure and simple. It's a tax. And that only Congress has the power to tax. The president does not, and that's that. Well, of course, he's right that the Well, of course, he's right that the Constitution grants Congress the power over the purse under Article 1, including taxation. But the purpose of a tariff is less about taxing the citizens and more about conducting international affairs, economic, diplomatic, and national security. Just last week, the president's use of a 100% additional tariff on Communist China, responding to Communist China's massive tariff on rare earth minerals that we need for our military systems, our missiles, that we need for our computers, that we need for 1,000 other uses relating to our economy and our security needs in this country. So was that tariff a tax? Certainly it wasn't a tax. To say a tariff is a tax, and that's that, Mr. Chief Justice, is ludicrous. In fact, a tariff issued on foreign products by our government is not a direct tax on our citizens. The argument goes that it increases the price of goods and services when foreign products are imported into our country. Therefore, it's a tax or an indirect tax. So it's not an actual tax, if we want to be exquisitely clear with our language. And while it may lead to an increase in the price of a product, it may not in the price of another product, as we've actually seen over the last 8 months. So this isn't theoretical, we see it. Some products increase in price, some products don't. The President of the United States negotiates and he warns the country, we're increasing our tariff, but your tariff's high, but you better not increase our prices. It's a give and take, and that's a constant. But to say that it's a tax in the context of what the framers of the Constitution had in mind under Article 1 of the power of the purse is simply not correct. But I have another reason to respond to Justice Roberts. Justice Roberts, you said a tariff is a tax and the president does not have the power to raise taxes. Yet when it comes to executive branch regulations, virtually all of which drive up costs to domestic producers and consumers and are not passed by Congress, nor do they reach the level of a presidential signature, but are issued by the bureaucracy, why is that not an unconstitutional tax?
That's a good point. That's a good point. But think about it. If your policies are to bring in goods where there's a tariff to try to normalize the balance of trade, or to use it as a leverage to bring back manufacturing into your country, all right, and the cost of the goods are coming in higher, there are policies that can be made, let's say, through some sort of nuclear weapons agreement between nations to try to disarm. Within that agreement, there is this policy where certain goods will be sold into into the country, into someone's country. Let's say, for example, we do an arms deal with Russia. And we say that, well, we will import Russian automobiles. And let's say Russian automobiles are super cheap, all right? And it causes a negative externality in domestic car production. And the domestic cars can't sell. And therefore, more jobs are lost. Is that unfair to the citizenry, the American citizenry? Now take this step further. Let's say it's a good that's hard to come by. And we're importing this good from Russia, where it's higher. It's a better quality product than, let's say, a domestic version. And the domestic version it's not as, the marketing for the domestic version isn't there, the quality of the product isn't there, but this, for whatever reason, the Russian product has a better quality and has a better marketing, but it's much higher in price. And it comes in, and people want that higher quality item because it's a luxury item. The domestic producer may view that as, well, that's a negative externality. You stopped selling, the domestic producer wasn't able to compete with the luxury item that was being imported from Russia. Well, is that a tax? If the price went up for that particular good and people are buying it? Is that is there any repercussion for
I found some web results. I can show them if you ask again from your iPhone.
Is there any repercussion that the domestic company could get some sort of court alleviation from? I don't know. So just because the price goes up doesn't necessarily mean it's a tax. I think that's the point that Mark Levin is seeing. But the way I see this is it's more important. There's three ways for revenue. Just instead of viewing it as, is it a tax or not a tax? I don't think it really matters. If you look at it from the standpoint that revenues coming into a country for the government, it's through taxation, it's through debt issuance, and it's through tariffs. Now, if you're going to have a deficit, you're going to have to either raise tax or a combination, but either the only leverage you have is raise taxes if you're going to have a deficit, right? Because you could stop spending, the overspending. But if you're not going to stop the overspending, you have to raise taxes. You have to issue more debt or have tariffs or a combination. That's the only way. Now, if you raise debt, then you are, because this debt is usually issued at like 10 years or 5 years, you're paying interest on the debt. So it's actually more costly to issue debt than a tariff or a tax. Now, as a citizen, which one would you want? Would you rather pay the tax, the 5-year or 10-year debt, your portion of it, or the tariff? And the reality of the situation, depending on how the taxes are set up, but let's just say it's income tax compared to tariffs, all right? You're better off if you don't want to be taxed, quote taxed, don't buy the product. You can't opt out when it's bond issuance, debt issuance, or income tax increase. You have less power. So really, tariffs give the population the choice if they want to buy that product or not. Now, theoretically, if there's no other commiserate product out there on the market, then you don't really have a choice. Well, maybe you know, it depends on if you really need it or not. If it's a luxury item versus a necessity. So tariffs are probably better than taxes or bond issuance. I think that's the bigger issue here. Now, also tariffs are a great leveraging point because it forces corporations to come back and build the infrastructure in the United States to make their products. And they'll produce an economic cluster. Now, you can also give incentive for taxes, tax breaks for these companies, but usually the tax breaks aren't as beneficial compared to long-term extraction of labor arbitrage or regulatory arbitrage overseas. And that's why these multinational corporations want to make stuff in another country. It's not because they're better, it's because they're cheaper. They may have a regulatory framework that is more lenient for them compared to the United States. So there's an arbitrage that they're playing. So if you have taxes or you have tariffs, if you have tariffs on their goods, you can push them to the point of coming back to the United States. And then there's this added component. We have a debt to GDP ratio problem. If the debt is too high and the GDP is too low, then certain econometric theory suggests that you will have a society that will no longer be able to be a hegemonic power. Well, if we don't bring back our manufacturing and increase our GDP to get a better debt to GDP ratio, we may lose our American empire. Now, it's better to be an American empire than an American failed state. So using tariffs to force companies to come back to the United States so we have a better debt to GDP ratio, so we can fund our debt at lower interest rates. But not just that, to have the economic prowess and the military prowess to sustain a war, especially with China. So I'm concerned about this nitpicking of legalese about what is a tariff and what isn't a tariff at the Supreme Court, where they don't realize that they may win the argument, they may be correct on the definition of what a tariff is, but their conclusion leads to us to be weakened. Now, the problem comes in is that, all right, let's say that the Supreme Court rules against Trump. The reality of the situation is Congress should be more forceful and give, with a sunset, tariff policy, some sort of tariff policy for the executive branch to force companies to come back to the United States. The problem is that Congress isn't doing their job because they're captured by the multinational corporations that don't want the tariff. And because of campaign finance and the cost to run a campaign, also certain positions that a congressman or a senator may have in the market. They may not want to create policy, create legislation that is promoting a tariff regime because it may hurt their portfolio or hurt their PAC or hurt the individuals or the corporations that help with their campaigns. So Congress is captured. They're not going to do their job. The Supreme Court is assuming that Congress is going to do the right thing or can do the right thing. And I think that's a failed assumption because Congress is captured. And there is an incentive for Congress not to have tariffs because they have positions in multinational corporations for their personal portfolio. So the Supreme Court is setting up in motion actually a decline of our manufacturing base because of the definition of what a tariff is. I think it's a problem. I think it's a big problem. The whole point is what's important for the long-term viability of the United States in terms of its military and economic superiority. And if we keep on gutting our manufacturing base, we're going to lose the tacit knowledge to be able to innovate. You can't innovate on paper or just on a computer screen. You got to make stuff. If you don't make stuff, you don't have the tacit knowledge. I mean, here, perfect example. We really don't know how the pyramids were built in Egypt. But I'm willing to bet that during the zenith of Egyptian culture, many people knew because they saw every day how the pyramids were built. So there was something like that. We've lost the knowledge of what that is. And that's a perfect example of what's happening in manufacturing. Just with a 25 to 35 year time frame in terms of mechanical engineering, how stuff is made. A lot of people in the United States have lost that just because of NAFTA policies and globalization policies. That's over a 30-year period. Now extrapolate that in 1, 2, 3, 4 generations, and you lose how to make stuff. Now the Egyptians don't know how they built the damn pyramids. And the technologies that were lost because of some sort of catastrophic event that took place in Egypt where there was a loss of knowledge. Now, what that catastrophic event was, who knows? Some people would say that there's some sort of biblical component to it because of the Exodus. Others may say that there was some sort of climate change component to it, or maybe there was famine. Some people think it's ancient aliens, whatever it is. But the thing is that there was tacit knowledge that was lost because the ones that made things stopped making them in that country.
Violation of separation of powers. In other words, you have the EPA, you have the Agriculture Department. They exist to issue regulations. And they have issued over the course of decades hundreds of thousands of regulations, filling millions of pages of the Federal Register, controlling what you do, what you can't do, your expenses, the supply chain, on and on and on. So if Justice Roberts, the Chief Justice, is concerned about a tariff being a tax, well, then why isn't he ruling and arguing that regulations are taxes, that regulations by their very nature are unconstitutional because they're coming out of the bureaucracy, not even the president, but under the umbrella of the executive branch, and therefore that violates separation of powers of the power of the purse. Has anybody heard him argue that? I have not. Doesn't that violate separation of powers? Let's go to Justice Barrett. In part, she seemed obsessed with precedent, judicial precedent, and spent a lot of her time at oral argument focused on the fact there's no judicial precedent for the proposition that the president has so much discretion in levying tariffs. I can't find any case that rules that he does. Where's the case, she kept asking. The Solicitor General pointed to a lower court ruling, which she found unpersuasive. Yet a relentless focus on this was very odd to me. The fact is, Justice Barrett, there is no precedent, and that proves nothing. For example, there's no precedent that cuts the other way either. That is, there's no precedent that a president cannot exercise the kind of tariff authority that President Trump is exercising. Where's the case for that? Other than the one that's on appeal, where's the case for that? In fact, at one point, Barrett read language in the relevant statute, which he claimed was not ambiguous. The language is clear, it's robust, and limited the president's tariff authority. That's the intent, she said. Yet, she purposefully cherry-picked 2 or 3 words and left out the other words in the statute that disproved her point. That's kind of troubling, isn't it? Then there was Justice Sotomayor.
It's not a hobby. It's your empire. It's not DIY. It's
Then there was Justice Sotomayor, who, among other things, insisted that trade quotas against certain products were different than tariffs. Quotas and tariffs are different because, she said, tariffs are a tax and quotas are not. If you contend that tariffs are a tax,
but here's the thing: is that if you have a quota, then you are curtailing the supply relative to the demand, and then the prices are going to go up. If you have a tariff, the prices go up. So I don't see that much of a difference. Now, Trump's probably going to lose this case. I think the Supreme Court is going to lose. I think the Supreme Court is going to strike it down, and Trump will lose it. But the thing is that just because legally that there is the definition between quotas and tariffs and what a tariff is and blah, 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 and is there really an emergency power? All right. Congress should be doing their job, but they won't. They won't do their job. And because of them being captured, American manufacturing will start to falter again. So these individuals that didn't make the Supreme Court's justices don't make anything. Their whole life has been pushing paper. They're intellectuals. They don't know how stuff is made. And so they may be right. They're so smart that they're stupid. They're so smart with being right that they end up destroying the economy. So a quota to try to curtail the imbalance of trade will lead to higher prices for that item that has the quota. How's that any different than the price increase of a tariff on a good? Because you're trying to prevent that good from being sold into the country until there's free trade. We don't have free trade because you have to remember, it's not just the United States issuing the tariff. You're talking about other countries preventing American goods to being sold in their country too. So this is an issue of trying to reach free trade. We don't have free trade right now. And who started this problem? It wasn't the United States. So it's important to realize that the tariff in the telos of this policy is to bring back manufacturing to the United States. And eventually have real free trade or fair trade. Right now, what we have is a trading policy that's somewhat convoluted, and our trading partners have barriers for American companies to enter in their market. and they subsidize their industries and all this stuff. So there's a incorrect signal that's being produced in the global market about comparative advantage, because you have governments intervening in so many different markets to try to protect their particular industries. It's not real. We don't have free trade. I don't think we've ever had free trade. There's a distortion that's taking place.
Apply in the face of increased demand, thereby driving up the prices of goods. And that's essentially a tax on the consumer. They argue in violation of the power of the purse, separation of powers, Article 1. How can you then argue that quotas, which have the same purpose, that limit the import of certain goods, does not exactly the same thing for the purpose of driving up costs, helping specific industries, I assume. That's why President Reagan did it with Harley Davidson and others. How is that not a tax to the consumer? If a tariff is a tax to the consumer, how can she distinguish in that respect from a quota to a tariff? The purpose of both, based on her logic, again, is to drive up the cost of goods and effectively tax the end user. She can't have it both ways. Quotas are okay, but tariffs aren't constitutionally. Quotas don't violate separation of powers, but tariffs do. And I might add, for Justice Barrett's benefit, if the precedent you want, then you got it. Where is it? Presidents have instituted quotas throughout much of our history without congressional approval.
I've read her book.
That's a precedent.
I've read her book. Now, she's an English major. She was a law professor and all this stuff. I read her book. I was not impressed with the writing of the book. I was expecting something much more scholarly. Now, the books that I read are at a high level, and maybe that's the reason why. Maybe she forcefully dumbed it down for the masses, or maybe it was just a ghostwriter. I don't know. I was not impressed with the quality of the writing. What I was impressed with was she described in her book what goes on behind the scenes in terms of the briefs, preparing for the hearing, what happens with the voting behind the scenes, and who ends up writing the case, dealing with the clerks and all this. Behind the scenes understanding, I thought was well done. That part was well done. Now, in her book, she really focuses on this idea of what's the word mean, right? And not in the modern context, but what was the meaning of when it was originally written, either the statute or, in this case, the constitutional law. What's the constitutional law and the meaning of the words in the zeitgeist of the 1700s, and how that may have been applicable even before the 1700s with the common law, or what was going on with the thinking of Hamilton or Madison in the Federalist Papers. So what words mean are really important. Now, she's a classic example where she could be right. She's so smart she's right, right? But she's also so smart she's stupid. Okay? You can be right and stupid. Now, what do I mean by that? You can be right in what the word means for tariffs, or the differences between a tariff and a quota, even though from an economic lens, there is no difference. But if in a legal lens, it may be different because of the intent of a different word, or where the comma is in a sentence or in a statute or whatever. She may be so smart that she's stupid, because by striking down this case, it reduces the prowess of the executive branch to initiate policy to bring back manufacturing and to build back up the tacit knowledge that we've been losing in manufacturing. And when you make things, you innovate. When you don't make things, you don't innovate. You need to make the stuff. You need to understand intimately about the materials that are being used, the processing that is used, how the manufacturing line moves out of tolerance and then back into tolerance over time. And what are those variables for that stochastic process? She's not smart enough. You know why? Because she didn't build anything. This is what happens when you have a bunch of bureaucrats, a bunch of paper pushers, a bunch of academics coming out of humanities and not coming out of STEM. Now, we don't want just technocrats, all right? But we also need some common sense. And I'm not so sure she has common sense. She's gonna be focused on what's the definition of tariff, and she will weaken the position of Trump and disallow the renaissance of American manufacturing. Now, the chief justices at the Supreme Court are going to say, well, just kick it to Congress, and Congress can give it to the president. Well, let's use some common sense, Barrett. Do you think Congress is captured by K Street? Who do you think's running K Street? The multinational corporations. Who really will benefit from striking down tariffs? The multinational corporations, not the American citizen. So Congress isn't going to do the right thing. So once again, so smart, stupid.
Now let's go to Justice Gorsuch. He raised the issue of delegation, or what we call the non-delegation doctrine. That is, Congress cannot delegate a core power under Article 1, the power of the purse, to another branch. In this case, the executive. Gorsuch relied mostly on hypotheticals, such as what if a president wanted to shut down trade altogether? Did he just regulate commerce as he sees fit? Now, I'm not a big fan of these kind of arguments. Let me make a couple of points in response to Justice Gorsuch. First of all, it's a practical matter. What president would shut down trade altogether? And for what purpose? Even in the world of hypotheticals, this seems utterly absurd to me.
If they shut down all trade, it could be through a pandemic, some sort of terrorist attack, or a Manchurian candidate that wants to destroy the United States. So it is possible, Levine. It is possible. So Gorsuch is not wrong about that. Gorsuch also was focused on the idea, when will that power ever be taken away? If Congress did give the power to the president to have unfettered tariff control, then when will that ever be taken back? Well, you would need it's a two-thirds. I think you need a 2/3 veto, striking down with the veto of the president. So let's say Congress issued a bill that states that they're taking away tariff powers from the president. All right, let's just say the Supreme Court says that Trump can do this. And Congress decides, let's say if the Democratic Party wins 2020 in 2026, and they control the House and the Senate. Trump's still in the presidency. They craft a bill to take away tariff power. Trump will veto it. But all they need is 50, all they need is a majority vote, right? To pass the legislation. Trump vetoes it. Now they need 2/3 vote. Now, if there's enough Republicans willing to side with the Democrats, or the Democratic majority is large enough, then they override the veto. Now, Gorsuch is basically saying the probability of doing that veto, overriding the veto, is going to be small. Well, I disagree with that. There has been times where it has been. So the question is, did Congress really give carte blanche tariff power to the President of the United States? And are we really in an emergency situation? And what's the definition of an emergency? Can you have a long-term emergency where it lasts, that you want to do a soft landing because you see the emergency emerging in 5 years? Or does the emergency have to be imminent? And that's what they're debating about also in the Supreme Court, is what's the definition of an emergency? Well, if you look at the word emergency, emergent means that it is emerged, right? It's immediate. So through legalese, you can't do a soft landing using tariff policies to reboot the manufacturing base so we have more economic prowess, especially for our military. It has to be in an emergent, it has to have already emerged or is about to emerge, not a 10-year or a 5-year down the road event. I think when you look at this in its totality, in the final analysis, we're seeing pernicious decisions that, when put in a certain category, a certain bubble, and looked at it individualistically, the Supreme Court is correct in the way they are probably going to strike down the use of tariffs by Donald Trump. The problem is that their decision will lead to a pernicious set of events that will actually weaken the country. So smart that they're stupid.
Apart from the fact that it would be political suicide for him and his party, and that every corner of the population would revolt, Congress has the power to impeach and remove a president, and let me suggest that that would happen in record time if any president did that, and both parties would participate in it. But putting aside the fanciful, where is the line drawn, he asks, in the president's power to regulate Congress? Now, that's a legitimate question. Of course, that's a question you could ask Congress. Where's their line? Or to...
What does it mean to reconnect? To breathe deeper? To feel smaller in the best way?
Where's their line? Or depending on how this court itself exercises power, any court, it's a question you could ask the judiciary. Where's the line? The better question, in my view, is who decides where the line is under our Constitution? That's what has to be worked out. If it's unclear, or if it involves both politically elected branches, Congress and the president, then my question is, why is the Supreme Court even involved in this point? What is it that the Supreme Court's deciding here? You have private parties and maybe states that go to the Supreme Court. So now the Supreme Court feels that it needs to intervene because you have this lower court that's ruled that what the president has done is unconstitutional. And the court's now asking questions, where's the line? What about non-delegation? Isn't this a tax? It's different than a quota system. Court, why are you involved in this? There may be a time when you need to be involved in this, but it seems to me this is way premature. For example, Congress has taken no steps, not one step at all, to quote unquote, take back its tariff power under the power of the purse. No steps. In fact, Congress as an institution isn't even involved in this litigation. Well, you might say that's because the Republicans are in charge. Good. So what? But that underscores the fact that the voters can have a say in the next election if they're upset with what the president's doing, and then they'll have their representatives who can take action if they have enough votes. You might then say, well, it's not up to the voters. We're talking about the Constitution and separation of powers. Fair enough. Interpretation of the Constitution is not based on election. Talking about separation of powers. Okay, so is the president. He's talking about separation of powers too. The Solicitor General argued that tariffs have multiple purposes, the most direct and important of which relate to diplomacy, international economic policy, national security. I just gave you China as an example. There are many, many, many more. As such, the power is not mostly or even primarily found in the power of the purse. It's not a direct tax, but in Article 2, under the president's power, that the framers gave the president of the United States. Then the follow-up is, but every tariff on every country is not about diplomacy and international economic policy and national security. Certainly not an emergency requiring immediate and unilateral presidential action. Okay. Then what's the resolution of that? The 9 lawyers in black robes in the Supreme Court are going to figure this out? Or they know they can't figure that out. So what's the resolution? There's 190 countries. Every decision by a president is going to be challenged by a private party or a state in federal court. So now these lower federal courts, these federal judges, more lawyers in black robes with 2 or 3 clerks, they're going to figure it out, whether it's a national security or diplomatic issue or international economic issue. So their opinion is now going to substitute for the president and Congress. They're going to decide in each and every instance. Is that what the framers intended? They didn't even create these judges. That's absurd. Where does that wisdom and power come from? Nowhere. So my final reply to Justice Gorsuch is, if delegating unbounded tariff power to a president is dangerous, and to be clear, I don't believe that has happened here. And more to the point, I don't believe President Trump is arguing that he has unbounded power, but is complying with the law and the Constitution. Then how do you explain the massive power of the bureaucracy to affect every aspect of our society through regulations, indirect taxation, and the like? A point I raised with Justice Roberts. Even reversal of the so-called Chevron decision. That goes to the issue of administrative and judicial review, not the general power of the bureaucracy to regulate anything and everything and drive up our costs through, effectively, taxation. The president has to be in a position to make these decisions, not Congress, assuming they're not shut down and out of office.
So you have policies that can affect the price of goods and the flow of goods. Why isn't there a discussion about that? At what point do you say that, well, tariffs are bad, but a policy that leads to raising prices because of inflation, all right, is also unconstitutional by let's say the executive branch, right? If the Supreme Court is saying you can't do tariffs because it's going to be a tax, it's going to cost money for the end user, or you're mitigating the free flow of goods, and you're, say, harming a multinational corporation unduly. Well, what about other policies? What about other fiscal policies that leads to the cost of goods to go up? and circumvents the flow of certain goods coming in. What about that? Isn't that unconstitutional? Is it unconstitutional to cause inflation?
Not the bureaucracy, certainly not the courts. And Congress hasn't even pushed back. Separation of powers. Justice Kavanaugh is following up on Justice Barrett's argument. Why would a rational Congress give the president the power to essentially shut down trade? This is not about Congress giving the power to the president to shut down trade or over all trade. This is about the president exercising legitimate statutory and constitutional power with respect to dealings with other countries and their governments, and often in response to other countries and their governments related to tariffs, national security, other economic conditions, even trade barriers that they are imposing on our citizens. How would it, as a practical matter, be handled by Congress? It can't. By the courts, it must never. So who's left? The bureaucracy or the president? Or addressing other countries and their governments, stealing proprietary technological information. He uses tariffs to fight that. Violating our patents. He uses tariffs to fight that. Dumping the products in our country. He uses tariffs to fight that. But if you're like Roberts, tariffs are a tax and that's it. I don't even think somebody contemplating going to law school would ask a more foolish question. So who else is in a position to get
250 years ago, a promise was made to connect families and friends near and far. How we deliver has changed, but our purpose hasn't, especially during the holidays.
So who else is in a position to gather the information, monitor the activities, who has a State Department, who has ambassadors, who has international trade advisors and so forth and so on, a massive federal government to advise and provide them with information and so forth to make these decisions? Only the president. So to underscore, the president is not issuing a direct tax on consumers. The president is not usurping the power of the purse. The president is not shutting down trade. The president is not defying any law or legal prohibition. Congress has not taken a single step to counter the president's policies. Congress has not, by its inaction or action, delegated to the president its core functions, but neither has it delegated it to the 9 lawyers on the Supreme Court. In any event, and this is crucial in my view, the proper ruling from the Supreme Court would be as follows. Rule that there's no constitutional conflict at this point and direct that the case be dismissed at the lower court. Congress itself is not seeking judicial relief. The political branches need at least some time to work it out. Should there be a conflict, should an actual conflict arise, it is not the proper role of the court or any court to intervene at this point at the request of private parties or even state attorneys general. This is a political issue at this time. It could become a more constitutional issue. Even when listening to the questions from the justices, most of the questions are political and ideological in nature. To the extent they attempt to wrap them in the Constitution, they're not making any sense. And if the court intervenes, it can create havoc in the president's dealings, our country's dealings with foreign countries and governments, our national security interests respecting trade, and a whole host of issues that we cannot even contemplate, and these justices can't contemplate or even know about. Furthermore, who will make all these decisions? How is it determined who will make all these decisions? If the court rules the wrong way, in my opinion. As for Congress, well, at least the last time I checked, they can't even get a damn budget.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page.
It boils down to Congress not doing their job. And it's because they're captured. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin C and magnesium. This will help with your skin, your brain function, and your immune system. Magnesium and zinc will help with your brain function and immune system. Take them together. Drink it with filtered water, especially during the fall and winter season. But you should be taking this year round. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. Get the vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 will help to build denser bone, help with your cardiovascular health, and help for your cells to go into apoptosis, especially if they're infected. It's really important to take vitamin D3 during the fall and the winter season. Ubiquinol, the most bioavailable form of CoQ10 that you can get. There's nothing better than this. This will soak up free radicals, help the health of your mitochondria, boost up your ATP levels so your cells have more energy, and ubiquinol will protect your neurons. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ubiquinol.
Tim, come some very costly ideas.
This will be an age where New Yorkers expect from their leaders a bold vision of what we will achieve. An agenda that will freeze the rents for more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants. Make buses fast and free. And deliver universal childcare across our city.
Now, how he pays for all these multi-billion-dollar programs, still not clear. But the affordability message.
Now
that
think
he
about
pitched in
this.
the campaign
Now
is
think about
wasn't-
this. The Supreme Court is saying you can't raise tariffs on multinational corporations because it's a tax on the citizenry. All right. Why can't the Supreme Court strike down the crazy socialism of trying to control the prices of housing? Because when you try to control, if you cap the cost of housing, what will happen is that you're raising the costs of units that are not city subsidized. So you, in effect, have a policy that's raising the costs of other citizens. So policies can create a negative externality. So they're trying to help some people, 2 million people in New York, and 6 million will have to pay more. 6 million have to pay more, 2 million have frozen rent for 2 years or whatever, and then it'll go up. Isn't that unfair or undue stress on the 6 million citizens of New York? I would say yes. Why is this allowed? Oh, you're trying to help people. But the thing is the economics. You are setting the cost of something that is below the market rate. So really, to fix the problem, to get prices down, it's very simple. If the demand is fixed or is relatively inelastic, you have to increase the supply, and then the price will go down.
As polling shows how Americans across the country feel, 7 in 10 say grocery costs are higher than a year ago, and 6 in 10 report that their utility bills are also rising.
The biggest issue for me was all the affordability, the inflation, groceries, and all of that.
How do you pay $2,000 for a one-bedroom apartment? It's ridiculous.
Having trouble keeping up with the rent, buying groceries. When a lot of people live in our buildings for years, we've had families there for over a decade, and they can't afford to live here anymore.
And despite a track record of failure across the world, the false promises of a socialist utopia continue to lure people in. Even a growing number on Main Street who feel strained as Wall Street flourishes. Now, the indoctrination of socialism starts in our education system.
College is a place where it's one of the only places where bad ideas can keep living because they never get tested against reality.
The time and again we've seen
YouTube Premium is ad-free YouTube and the YouTube Music app all together. One subscription.
The time and again we've seen nations that have experimented with socialism come hobbling back to free market systems. Could a short dance with socialism be just the kind of real-life education Americans need? We're going to be tackling all these questions with our all-star panel, Plus, campus reform reporter Emily Sturge is going to be helping us understand how a major revolution in education could help us end the radical brainwashing of our future leaders. So let's get right into it. Joining me now for a packed hour, we have Wall Street Journal editorial board member Alicia Finley, The Fixer host on Fox, Marcus Lemonis, NYC councilwoman and immigrant from the Soviet Union, Ina Vernikov, and United Refining Company chairman and CEO, as well as Red Apple Group chairman and CEO, John Catsimatidis. Great to see you all. Thank you for being here. Ina, first to you. Your family came to escape Marxism. Now you're living in a capitalist city that has a Marxist mayor. How does that make you feel?
Oh, it's absolutely devastating. Families like mine escaped socialism and communism. The former Soviet Union was a communist country, and we fled here in the 80s and the 90s for capitalism, for the free market economy, for the American dream. This is the country, this is the place where our parents taught us, if you work hard, you could be anything you want to be. And that's exactly what happened. We came here, we didn't speak English, we had to get accustomed to a new country, to a new life, to a new language. We became doctors, we became lawyers. I'm a member of the government in the largest city in the world. And the idea that everything that we escaped is coming here is absolutely unbelievable.
We should mention, by the way, that you're in a very rare conservative enclave, or at least more conservative than most of New York, where a lot of former residents of the Soviet Union live. So that reflects your opinion, and I assume the people that live in your community as well.
Oh, my constituents are absolutely devastated. We all feel the same way about this.
John Catsimatidis, for those who don't know you, you're in a lot of different businesses, oil, grocery stores, etc. How does a business person do business with a Marxist mayor?
It's going to be more difficult. We are hoping that Governor Hochul, who's the current governor, is tough enough to lean on him to make sure he does the right things. Then we have President Trump, who's one tough guy, and he has said to me and has said to people that the fact is that the federal funds will keep moving to New York. But I suggested to him maybe put a monitor in to make sure the money is spent properly and doesn't go poof.
By the way, we saw that in the 1970s. There was the Mack Commission, a commission that monitored very closely the budgets as New York was essentially going bankrupt. Is it a similar thing that you want to impose now?
Well, I told President Trump, I said to him, my recommendation is that let the people of the city of New York and the state of New York should not suffer. It's to make sure the money is spent properly, is the proper situation. And the money should keep flowing, but you should have somebody in there that you trust to oversee it.
Marcus, the fact that the focus is on New York is because it's such an extraordinary situation. The city of capitalism with a Marxist mayor. But this kind of movement you see happening all over America. You've got businesses all over America. How is middle America responding to all this?
I think that the one thing that we have to think about as we sit here today is that affordability is an issue everywhere. It is not just in New York City, from Seattle to Minneapolis to Chicago to wherever it may be. But I have a high level of confidence, and you probably would expect me to say this, that capitalism will always win out. And that the idea of socialism is, in my opinion, a good experiment. But you say that we're just going to experience it for the first time. What's going to happen? It exists everywhere. It exists everywhere. This idea that people want things for free and don't want to work for it exists everywhere.
But Alicia, it hasn't existed in the Democratic Party for everywhere. And that's the question. Democrats are now clasping hands with Marxists like Mamdani. I just want to play a little bit from Governor Kathy Hochul about a week ago when she fully endorsed Mamdani. Play that tape.
Take that energy, that passion, and take it into 26 so that we can take back the House of Representatives, take the Senate, and we take back America. Thank you, Queens. Thank you, New York. I love you guys.
Explore your sleep and save during the Veterans Day mattress sale at Raymore Flanagan.
was the shot there, the hands raised in the air. So has socialism now become a platform of the Democrat Party?
Well, I think the party is moving in that direction, but you have to actually look at some other places in the country where it's moving in the opposite direction. I would point to San Francisco, where you have a Mayor Daniel Lurie, who has struck a decidedly different tone, has positioned himself more as a moderate and is trying to tackle the city's problems, homelessness, the cost of living, and has actually tried to welcome businesses, suggested lowering tax rates. And you look out in LA and you have Mayor Karen Bass, who has been an abject failure. But it looks like the city is actually moving in the opposite direction and may elect a reformer. Austin Buechner, a former LA superintendent, LA Unified superintendent, a very pro-business background, is mounting a formidable challenge. So what you see is in many cities around the country, when they swing left, they tend to swing back right. And so I think, and you also saw, by the way, on the New Jersey and Virginia races, they elected moderate Democrats, at least Democrats who campaigned as moderate.
And in fact,
we're not radical.
we've seen it not only in cities in America, but we've seen it in countries too. I mean, Bernie Sanders is always talking about how he'd like to be like Sweden socialism. Well, the Swedish socialists were on the run recently because the fact that their system wasn't working out so well. They haven't veered all the way to the conservative side, but they certainly dropped a lot of their socialism.
Well, that's right. They privatized a number of businesses, deregulated their telecom sector, reduced their tax rates. They are still very high. And they, oh, by the way, they also have vouchers, private school vouchers. They, in some ways, they're actually more of a market system than the U.S. is.
Although I got to tell you, I did the homework, and the highest tax rate in Sweden is now equal to living in New York or California pay taxes, 52% if you add it all in. So it's, we are becoming more socialist as the socialists are becoming less so. Well, America's Democrat socialists want to take the failed practice of public housing to new extremes, even calling for a complete government takeover of private housing in America, and they want to do the same with medicine. Watch. Presidents Ronald Reagan and FDR represented different parties, but both recognized that government safety nets could suffocate our free market if they grew too big. In the State of the Union address in 1935, FDR said, quote, "Continued dependence upon relief induces a spiritual and moral disintegration, fundamentally destructive to the national fiber." Ronald Reagan put it more simply.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Since then, government has grown far bigger than either could have imagined. But American socialists insist that government's not big enough. They suggest that all our needs, including food, housing, and healthcare, are a national right. The socialist and ex-mayor of New York has even suggested a government takeover of private housing.
We'll have to go beyond the market. We won't decommodify housing overnight, but we know what we have to do.
Decommodify is Marxist newspeak for removing the tradable value of an asset. But do American homeowners really want to see their single most important asset lose its value? As for public housing, whether in the South Bronx or Chicago, most of those experiments have ended as filthy, crime-ridden failures. Socialized medicine isn't much different. Even Bernie Sanders now admits that Obamacare hasn't fixed healthcare.
Remember, right now, our healthcare system is broken.
Ronald Reagan would remind Bernie that Obamacare and fully socialized healthcare systems are broken because there's too much government, not too little. Both major political parties used to agree that what made this country the most prosperous in the world was our free market, not socialism. John, what we were hearing from Mamdani is full-blown Marxism. To use a word like decommodify housing means to take the value of a $50 trillion private asset, that's the amount of money Americans have in their homes, and give it to the government. This is dangerous stuff.
Well, we have in New York City, we have what you call the NYCHA housing. And guess what? It was built by government money. People moved in. Guess what's going on? Nobody pays the rent. And nobody's getting evicted. So it doesn't work. NYCHA housing doesn't work. It's some people are paying the rent. Most of them are not paying the rent. So what happened? You know, if you compare Florida to New York, Right now, Florida has 23,700,000 people. New York is down.
We're gonna get into that.
19 million.
We're gonna get into all those details in a moment. But Marcus, the fact is, despite the fact there's an affordability crisis, I believe, particularly among young people in America right now, you do have some progress being made right now. You look at household income, for example, since Donald Trump came into office, and it is going up. The household income is going up above the rate of inflation. You also have the interesting situation that while Mamdani really campaigned on the idea of higher taxes, that's the only way he's going to pay for all of his extra billions of dollars of programs. New York voters, when they were asked about the question, do you like taxes? 60% of them said taxes actually hurt the economy. So there are all these contradictions in people's views right now.
I think you did an outstanding job of tapping into how people are feeling today.
Yes.
They didn't want a solution. They just wanted to know they were being acknowledged. When you look at New York City or any other major city, commerce is ultimately what determines the prosperity. And if people don't want to be in the environment, they don't want to work here, they don't want to visit here, there's going to be less folks coming here, less jobs. And what we think looks like socialism today is going to turn into devastation. I don't believe that's going to happen.
Alicia, spreading it beyond New York, California just is pushing this new wealth tax. New York would also have a wealth tax if Mamdani's able to convince the people in Albany, the people who run the state, to accede to his demands to have a wealth tax in New York City above what we already have. How many times have wealth taxes failed around the world? People just pick up and move, go somewhere else.
I think that's exactly right. You saw that in Europe, and that's why the French government has been reluctant to do so despite pressures from their flag. Now in California, they're scrounging for revenue, partly because the pandemic, COVID relief money is drying up. The income tax does generate revenue. But that could be also a problem if you have a market downturn. So hence they were looking for a wealth tax to essentially confiscate the money. I'd also point out that Democrats in Congress in 2021 proposed what is essentially a wealth tax, and that is a mark-to-mark tax on capital gains, so unrealized income. Now, I would not discount that as a possibility if Democrats gain control of Congress and the White House in 2028.
I believe we have a sound from Senator Blumenthal that I'd like to play because there is so much spending going on, not just on the local level, but already on the federal level, particularly with regard to Obamacare. Here's Senator Blumenthal. Roll it.
When the Affordable Care Act was passed, healthcare was a lot less costly than it is now. And insurance rates were a lot lower. So these healthcare tax credits are necessary in light of healthcare inflation to make it affordable.
You know, it looks like Obamacare is becoming socialized medicine. How did socialized medicine work where you came from?
Oh, terrible. It didn't. There were lines to the doctor. The doctor would use one set of instruments. The quality of healthcare was terrible. And it just doesn't work. It didn't work in the Soviet Union. It doesn't work in any other country.
Right. By the way, my wife had a stroke in London. Thankfully, she's okay, but we had to spend a month at British healthcare. Same in British healthcare. They were very nice people, but they were broke.
They were not very nice people.
They
in the Soviet Union.
Okay, probably not. But in London, they were good people, but they couldn't. The nurses had these little pocket screwdrivers with them wherever they went because all the equipment was breaking down. They didn't have the right medicines. People were dying of MRSAs all around.
And no anesthesia.
No. Oh, God. All right. Thank you, folks. Stick around. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
All right, team, let's.
Please come to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Good Night Formula. Good Night Formula will help you to get into those 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep, to consolidate memory, to detoxify your central nervous system, and you'll be well rested. Those 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep are super important. And when you do that regularly, you will slow down the aging process. This has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. Take it every night and improve your neural health. Omega-3 helps your cardiovascular health, brings down inflammation, and allows you to control your lipid profile. Super important. And omega-3 reduces the overclotting of red blood cells. Myotrol. Myotrol is super important to build muscle, especially when you're 40 years of age or older. When you get older, you don't express the genes to maintain and build muscle. Take Myotrol. This will help you to build the muscle. Do some resistance training. Drink it with filtered water. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans for you to build muscle. If you're an athlete, younger or older, you will benefit from this. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Myotrol, prevent muscle atrophy if you're older. And if you're an athlete, take Myotrol to improve your strength training. Clarity Factor. A very powerful neurostack to get rid of brain fog and allows you to concentrate. Over time, by taking Clarity Factor, you will improve your neuroplasticity that will lead to better memory and faster cognition. You will think quicker. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Clarity Factor. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video. Alrighty. Let's see here.
Yeah, they can set the price.
This is about beef prices.
President Trump ordering a DOJ investigation into foreign meat packers, accusing them of inflating U.S. beef prices. He says on Truth Social, quote, "We will always protect our American ranchers, and they are being blamed for what's being done by majority foreign-owned meat packers who artificially inflate prices and jeopardize the security of our nation's food supply." Joining me with his reaction is a fifth-generation rancher, Steve Lucy. Steve, thank you for joining us this morning. How big is your ranch?
It's big enough. I mean, I don't like to tell a lot of personal information, but I raise a lot of cattle. Not as many cattle as some of the big giant ranches out west,
Right.
but for Illinois, we raise quite a few cattle.
So would you say you're a mid-size?
Yeah, I would say I'm a mid-sized cattle farmer right now. And there's a lot of us out through the country scattered out still, but we've lost many of us. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing, a supply problem in the beef side.
Yeah, and consumers are seeing a real rise in beef prices. And the president is suggesting in this Truth Social post that it's because of these 4 companies that are the meat packers, and that they are setting the prices and increasing costs for the ranchers and for the consumers. Can you explain how these 4 meat packers are impacting your business?
Well, for instance, they set the price when I have me or a feedlot or another independent feedlot wants to go sell a fat beef. We have to take the price that is getting bid from, say, JBS. So essentially, there's no competition amongst the market. They're completely consolidated, owning like 85% of the beef industry, and we don't have a choice other than to take what the market price is. If we keep that beef and keep growing it, first of all, it becomes too fat, and it's not good for the animal, and it's not good for the consumer. So they know that when we have beef ready to sell, we have to move those beef. And
so they take advantage of that, yes.
Yeah, they can set the price on a whim. They can decide if they want to, cut less meat that day or for a week, and then therefore they can manipulate that market pretty easily. Now, if you were to buy a beef from me directly off my farm and I take it to a local processor, I would sell, I tell this story a lot. I sold a beef this summer and I took market price for the beef. The customer pays the processor at a USDA inspected facility, and we can get into that as well, but they pay the processor, and by the end of the day, they got the whole beef back. I think the total cost was like $6.25 a pound for the beef. So that's steak, roast, ground beef, and everything. When you're paying over $20 a pound for a ribeye in the store.
So is President Trump?
I'm telling you, I'm looking at beef prices. Now I buy it online in bulk, but the thing is that it's like $30 a pound. Now that's New York, but at least.
Is the answer to break up these four, have many more meat processors, especially locally? And is that a problem that USDA?
This is really important. I'll try to find the name of the book that I read. I met the author, and it discusses about the consolidation of big ag and how your grocery prices are going up because of the conglomerates. Now let me dig in to find out what the name of that book was. I read it about 1.5 years ago.
Secretary, Brooke Rollins can resolve by making it less regulation so that there are more local meat processors. Is that the solution?
So I'm glad you said that. That is one of the big solutions to this problem. And I don't want people to think this is going to happen overnight. This is going to take a lot of time. We don't have the infrastructure to have that many local processors out through the countryside right now. I mean, I have to drive 45 minutes to a local processor, and there's only one close to my area. So you take a lot of places in the country, there's not a local processor that can handle this. And the reason for that is because of.
Right, exactly. So the name of the book that I read, and I met the author, it's Barron's, and the subtitle is Money, Power, and the Corruption of the American Food Industry by Austin Friedrich. Forward by Eric Schlesinger. But the bottom line is this: it's big ag coming in and controlling the industry and raising prices. And that's through the regulatory agencies, and the regulatory agencies were captured. See, who regulates them? All right, Congress sets up in motion regulatory bodies, and then what happens is that the lobbying group, Big Ag's lobbying group, comes in and captures Congress. And what that does is it sets in motion a regulatory framework that will benefit the larger companies like Cargill, all right, and literally control the supply and raise up the prices. So we really need to break up these conglomerates. But I definitely recommend you reading Barron's by Austin Friedrich.
Regulations.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have so many regulations that it's not cost effective for a small business to start something like that. So that's one of the problems we have.
This is what happens in the book. The book, he explains this in detail. I think Austin's from Idaho or Iowa. It's maybe Iowa. But the bottom line is this: they create a regulatory framework, push out the small to medium-sized farmers or cattle ranchers, and force them to sell to the conglomerates, and they just keep on growing and growing and growing, and then they've controlled the supply. The quality goes down, the price goes up.
Main problem we have in this country is the supply. Actually, we've lost a lot of ranchers, and you know, some of us are getting older, and we just, after a while, you know, you give it up, and a lot of times there's not another person to come around. I'm the 5th generation. I'm probably going to have a son that's going to be the 6th generation if we can stay profitable and stay in the business. So we have to have a fair price for our beef, and you have to have a fair price of what you're buying. And there's so much middle cost involved. I think it's fair to look at that and look at these 4 big packers and see what is going on there, at least to find out.
Absolutely. Americans want more meat, right? We're realizing more and more the benefits nutritionally of meat.
Yes.
And we want more. We want to get our meat from small and mid-sized ranchers like you. And I personally prefer to have my meat processed at a local place where I can see what they do better than these big giant meat processing plants where I feel like it's not as safe and or humane. So all of those things come into play. Steve, thank you for joining us. Thanks for giving us this insight. Thanks for what you do. You make America better. This is sort of the backbone of who we are. And so thanks for doing what you do. And I hope you go into that sixth generation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you all having me. And I just want to give a shout out to all of our veterans this weekend. You know, without them, I don't exist as an operation, and none of us can live the way we live. And I mean, beef is a big part of the freedom in this country. And I always say, where there's beef, there's freedom. And that's what I believe.
I agree. And by the way, more beef for our military troops. Let's change what they're eating also. Give them more meat. Thanks so much for joining us, Steve.
Your fields are a reflection of you.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. Heirloom barley will detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. By bringing down inflammation and detoxifying your body regularly, you're improving your immune system, your endocrine system, even your brain function, and your vascular system. So please take this every day. This is a month's supply. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even just with milk. But take it every day. Do some resistance training. But the thing is that by doing this regularly, you're detoxifying your body and you're getting your body back into homeostasis. And when you're bringing down inflammation regularly and soaking up those free radicals, you're slowing down the aging process. Please go to my store and get the heirloom barley. And also go and get the collagen. This is dual purpose. This will help your skin, your hair, your nails, your cartilage, your joint health, your bone density, even your musculature. Take it every day. This is a month's supply. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Slow down the aging process. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order.
And performance isn't negotiable to you and to us. Introducing
President Trump accusing 4 of the biggest meatpacking companies of driving up U.S. beef prices, which hit record highs in August. The president blaming the companies of artificially inflating prices at the expense of America's farmers and consumers, directing the Justice Department to now investigate. News Nation's Marcus Espinoza is here to break it all down. I read the headline and I thought, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yes,
What's
it's
going on?
really expensive right now at the grocery store. The president now looking into it. You could say he has beef with this particular industry here. Oh, we got a whole thread of this stuff. He posted onto Truth Social on Friday, calling on the DOJ to act expeditiously by looking into what he's calling illicit collusion, price fixing, and price manipulation against companies that pack America's meat. Now, the president added that American ranchers are taking the blame for what is being done by majority foreign-owned meat packers who artificially inflate prices and jeopardize the security of our nation's food supply. And the DOJ responded immediately, with Attorney General Mamdani answering the president under an hour later to confirm that the Antitrust Division was looking into his request alongside the Department of Agriculture. While President Trump didn't call them out directly on social media, a press release from the administration points to the fact that a staggering 85% of all beef in the U.S. is processed by one of just 4 companies, a notable increase from the 36% these companies controlled back in 1980. And 2 of those companies are either foreign-owned or have what the administration is calling a significant foreign ownership. Now, there are obviously factors here at play, Hannah, besides the alleged collusion, but that's definitely a pretty meaty chunk of the argument.
I can't get enough of these puns. I love that.
And Cargill and Tyson, which are on that list, are heavy donors to Congress.
How in August, that was the highest beef price we saw. How high did it actually go?
Yeah,
it jumped quite a bit.
And another thing that's important to keep in mind, small ranchers and mid-sized ranchers, they're not large enough to have the political power to lobby Congress. But if you're a big conglomerate, you do. And so who's Congress going to listen to? The little farmer or Tyson Foods or Cargill? See the problem? Now extrapolate that with transnational capitalists and these global corporations that are playing the arbitrage, the regulatory arbitrage and the labor arbitrage in another country, and then selling the goods in the United States. Now you know why Congress isn't willing to fix the problem and bring back manufacturing, because Congress is on the take and benefiting from hyperglobalization.
Walk into a grocery store, even a budget store, and you try to look at any sort of produce or meat like this, the price has really gone up and it's really put a strain on families. So ground beef now costs an average of $6.63, and that's a 51% rise from 5 years ago and more than double what it would have cost 20 years ago. While demand for beef has been rising overall, that growth has slowed. Consumption has basically plateaued, according to market research. And the more premium cuts of steak like ribeyes,
This is interesting.
More than 4% decrease.
All right, consumption's declining. All right, the consumption of ribeye 4.4%. Ribeye prices 16% up. So as the price went up, the consumption went down. Ground beef consumption has gone up a little bit, 0.2%. Ground beef increase 12%. So what's really happening is that people are staying away from ribeye or other steak cuts, and they're going to ground beef because it's cheaper.
Pounds sold this summer versus the same period last year. At the same time, prices are rising, and it's not just impacting the grocery store. Restaurants are also raising their prices or shrinking portions, which might also explain why people are exploring other options. Now, this comes as the supply of beef is hitting new lows, spurred on by both natural causes like drought and increased operational costs. Last month, the White House announced it would quadruple the amount of beef it imports from Argentina to fight rising prices, but that drew heavy criticism from American ranchers. So the beef persists right now. And our wonderful producer, Tommy, really put those puns in. It's great research as well. But all things considered here, and all jokes aside, it's really expensive. That's a staple for a lot of American families, right? To be able to have that basic meal throughout the week. So worth investigating for a lot of families right now.
And you and Tommy showed that great graphic on how it's drastically increased in just the last few years.
A lot in 5 years. A lot. It's expensive now.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and detoxify your body with zeolite. Zeolite will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals. Super important, because you're surrounded by toxins and chemicals throughout the day. You ingest them, you breathe them in. It's in your water. Make sure you filter your water. Make sure you stay away from processed foods. But take zeolite. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue. Drink the filtered water. Detoxify your body every day. And by doing this, zeolite will bind to those toxins and chemicals and heavy metals and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Take it every day. It's very powerful, but it's very important to detoxify your body every day. Also, go to my store and get the dual purpose deodorants for males and females. You can get it in citrus or in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. You use them as a deodorant, but it will also help to detoxify your body. And when you detoxify your body regularly, your immune system and your endocrine system will perform better. These deodorants are made from essential oils from the Himalayas, extremely high quality. So please go to my store, get the deodorants, get the zeolite, use discount 5, and you get $5 off any order. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's go to live now talking about the flight cancellations.
Everything that does play out, and of course, a big story we're watching, the situation over at the airport. You can see several different live images that we do have coming in at this hour. And I can tell you right now, it is already very busy at several airports, as we've learned that there are just today more than 1,100 flights that have been canceled and about 800 or so that have been delayed. That number only expected to rise here as the day does progress. Now, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy issuing a warning saying if this government shutdown does continue for a period of time here, he could force airlines to cut up to 20% of their flights. That's 1 in every 5. The Federal Aviation Administration on Friday, just 2 days ago, instructing airlines to cut 4% of flights at 40 major airports due to those staffing shortages, again caused by the shutdown. Those cuts are going to rise to 10% by next Friday. So what does all this mean, and essentially what could be the impact to you at home? I do want to bring in Dr. Philip Mann, an aviation expert there at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us to discuss what a lot of people are talking about.
Sure thing.
All right, so first off, talking about...
Spreadsheet killed my sales. Wait, just try Python.
Discover Python sales CRM.
That's what we asked for.
All right, so first off, talking about just today, again, I said more than 1,100 flights canceled just for today, just for this Sunday, more than 700, possibly as many as 800 already delayed. How does that compare to, let's say, your average day? Because that seems like a very high number.
It sounds like a big number, but it's kind of important to keep in mind the kind of scale of air travel. You know, on any given kind of random day in the middle of like October, we might have 25,000, 30,000 flights that day. So if you cut down, 5-ish% of those, you're going to get several hundred, 1,000 something flights, a little more than that. And as we're creeping up towards the holidays, Thanksgiving flights might be 45,000, 50,000. So if we're cutting out, say, 5% of those flights, we're going to see a proportionately larger number. So the numbers sound big, and there is a little bit of a there could be a little bit of a difference of interpretation about how some people are interpreting these. For example, if the FAA is telling them to reduce capacity, basically they're reducing the total number of flights into an airport. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be a reduced, a total equal reduction in number of passengers, say, because they might change out a smaller plane for a bigger plane or something like that to keep, because a plane is a plane, one flight's one flight, and if it holds 50 people or it holds 500 people, it's still one flight.
When you talk about which actual flights are reduced here, is there kind of an airport or a type of flight that is more maybe at risk of being cut in those reductions?
Yeah, the FAA put out a command basically to the airlines to tell them to reduce the flights, and they told them to reduce flights at specific airports. Now, all airports are kind of interconnected, so the 5,000 or so commercial airports we have in the country, just those 40 are going to affect all of the other ones in total. But what I think the airlines, it's important to keep in mind they are businesses, so they're going to make the cuts where it makes business sense, so they can meet the capacity target, but then also maximize their revenue, minimize their cost losses, things like that. So I would expect flights that are kind of profit losers, low volume flights, low passenger flights to probably be cut first. Because again, if they have a flight that's got 6 people on it and they cut that flight, that's one of them they can drop it and keep the one that has 50 people on it and make more money that way. So that's going to be the kind of thing. I think they're going to probably look at cutting redundant flights or, where they've got 2 aircraft that are going to the same place, maybe an hour apart, trying to figure out how to combine those into a single flight. Because again, it's going to be from the airline's perspective. I mean, obviously, safety is always going to be the big thing. That's why we're making these reductions to begin with. But it's from the airline's perspective, it's going to be managing costs, managing losses, managing their revenue, and that's going to probably be the big driver for them.
As we go and look at shutdowns past year, have we seen a situation like this where we're talking 4% flight reductions, 10%, and then potentially, according to Duffy, 20%? Have we ever seen anything like that?
We have seen the extreme end of that. 9/11, when they canceled everything, it was 100%. But and in the days following that, where they allowed a few more flights, as that kind of got going. But we actually do flight reductions and flight kind of quotas, if you will, constantly all year round, especially when there's bad weather. We see if there's predicted, say, some really bad weather going in the Northeast, the number of flights allowed into the Northeast and into those airports will be reduced. It's not usually something that's public facing. Usually it's something that the FAA will say, hey, we got to reduce capacity because of weather, and then the airlines will handle it, and the airlines will just deal with the passengers, and everybody just kind of thinks the airlines just decided to do that. But it's a big coordinated effort between everybody involved in the national airspace system to maintain safety, even at the expense of the convenience of the flyers.
What sort
If
of,
you're planning on using the airlines, you probably may not want to during this holiday season, just for safety and for just sanity. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the complete multivitamin. This is easy to digest, and these have the multivitamins that you need for proper enzymatic activity so your cells perform properly. Take this every day. This is part of the foundation to slow down the aging process. Drink it with filtered water. Take it every day. Again, this is easy to digest multivitamin that will help with your cellular processes and your enzymatic activity. Please go to my store, use discount 5. You get $5 off any order, and get the multivitamin.
impacts would your average passenger, your average traveler who's just trying to get to a location, what are maybe the average issues that they are going to see as all of this is ongoing?
Yeah, well, I think they're going to see, kind of things that you'd expect with government systems under strain. Because keep in mind that the TSA is also in that same kind of boat that the air traffic controllers are in, as are all the maintenance people that work in the airfields. So I'd expect people to see longer lines. I'd expect people to see fewer secure checkpoints open. I'd expect people to see longer, maybe a little more hassle-prone kind of things where they're trying to get their flights resolved with the airlines. I think I kind of recommend for people, though, is just kind of keep in mind that, keep in mind your own personal risk tolerance. We already know that there are going to be flights canceled. There are going to be flights delayed. So maybe if people are super, super strict with their time, say they're traveling over Thanksgiving and they absolutely have to be back to work Monday morning, maybe they ought to fly back Friday or Saturday and not wait till try to catch a flight on Sunday. Manage your personal risk. And I think what we're going to see a lot from the passenger experience is that difference between the people that manage their risk and it kind of either planned ahead or allowed for the additional time and stuff versus the people that didn't. And that's going to be amplified over the holiday season because, say the month of October wasn't too bad because a lot of October is the usual daily professionals that travel a lot. I travel a lot, maybe you travel a lot. But then coming to holiday season, we get some of those folks that Thanksgiving is the only time they get on an airplane the entire year. If that, it might be the only time they get on an airplane every 5 or 6 years. So those folks are going to be showing up at the airport, thrown into the chaos in the middle of all the other stuff. So for the average person, it's probably going to be a little bit, probably a little bit more stressful, maybe a lot more stressful. But everybody's going to be trying to do the best they can from TSA all the way to air traffic controllers.
Which airports, and this is
direct eye contact, confident, all engaged.
Which airports, and this is kind of unrelated, but related in a sense, I just wanted to get your take on which airports could potentially have the biggest delays here as all of this is ongoing, because Atlanta seems to have the busiest airport, I would say, nationwide. If you've ever gone through there, you definitely know that. There's some other airports, like let's say I've been to the Lexington, Kentucky airport. They're not used to seeing a lot of delays. Orlando's kind of in the middle there in Florida. So which airports might see the biggest impact?
New York.
It's going to kind of depend what you mean and how it affects you personally. Because again, it's going to be they gave that list of 40 airports. Because of the way airlines work, they do it called a hub and spoke. So for example, I'll be flying over the holidays from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania down to Nashville, but I have to connect through Charlotte because that's a hub. So if Charlotte is one of the ones, and I don't have the list in front of me, but Charlotte is one of the ones that has reductions in flights, then both my flight from Harrisburg and my flight to Nashville may suffer because of something going on in Charlotte. So that's kind of thing is going to be the flights with multiple connections are going to be more prone to having interference with them. Whereas if you have a direct and nonstop flight, if I could get a nonstop flight, say from Harrisburg to Nashville, well, that's just one flight. I don't have to worry about my connecting second flight. I can just take one flight and it either runs or it doesn't. Or it's delayed or it's not, but then I don't have multiple touch points with the potential cancellations. Obviously, the bigger the airport, the busier the airport, the more operations they handle, the bigger the cuts are going to be. An airport that handles 5,000 flights a day, say, if there's a 5,000 operations a day, if they got to cut that by 10%, that's going to be 500. But an airport that handles 20 operations a day, they're going to see 2. So but those two might be the only ones going to where they're going. So kind of, so it's going to be very much a personal experience. It's not really a blanket thing for how people are going to feel the impact.
If we were to see the shutdown end today, that's not looking likely. We know the Senate is convening to potentially take a vote, but it's not expected to pass at this point. So if the shutdown, though, were to end today, how much longer would we likely see the impacts of this flight reduction? Is there any way to really know? Because I have to imagine it's not going to be an immediate solution.
No, it's not, because it's one of the ways we can kind of look at this is, we remember the 2018-2019 shutdown, which was 35 days. Now that one began at a couple days before Christmas, so we didn't experience that over the holidays the way we're going to experience this one. But that one ended when 10 air traffic controllers across the country had called out and forced the reduction in air traffic control and air traffic stuff. So, and then that situation with the reductions they had to do there still took many weeks to kind of wash out of the system and get back to normal. And we know, from all the coverage we've had over this year, that air traffic control is and has been for 40 years short-staffed. It has been short-staffed. So it's going to take, I would plan on a couple of months at least for it to get back to the way it was before the shutdown. Because even then, air traffic controllers were working 60-hour weeks, a lot of facilities, rotating shifts, understaffed, all that kind of stuff. So we're hoping to get back to that not great situation from where we are now. But now all these reductions are done just preemptively because we know the system's taxed. We know the system is under strain. So let's reduce the amount of throughput we're trying to force through the system to ensure the safety, even if it is compromising the convenience of the flyers.
All right, Dr. Philip Mann, thank you so much for taking the time, as always, to help break it down. And before I let you go, anything that
we're gonna go to Glenn Beck talking about Mamdani in the Marxist takeover in New York. Please help support capitalism by going to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotic. You can get it in powdered form or in veggie cap form. I usually take the powdered form because I take all these different powders, like the Gladiator Barley and the Boomer Boost and the collagen, the lignans. So it's just easier for me. But please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the powder or the veggie cap, drink it with filtered water, take it every day. And with a good gut biome, your health will improve. And I'll tell you how. First, you're going to be able to absorb your nutrients better. Your metabolism will increase. You will have less inflammation at the gut level. And your immune system at the gut level will improve. The communication between your gut and the liver will improve. And the communication between your gut and your brain will improve. You will sleep better. And by having better sleep, you will be consolidating memory, getting rid of brain fog. You're going to be detoxifying your central nervous system, and you'll be well rested. And over time, your skin will improve too. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get these probiotics. A good probiotic is the start of good health. Good gut biome will help to slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the probiotics, use discount 5, all caps, discount 5, get $5 off any order. Click the link in the description to go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Media and nationally syndicated radio host of the Glenn Beck program. Glenn Beck, thank you so much for being here.
It's an honor to be with you. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
It's an absolute honor to have you. So I know you're following this mayoral race that just concluded. Zohran Mamdani, New York City's Muslim socialist mayor. You have said that he's a combination of radical leftism and political Islam. Now, I'm with you on the radical leftism. I personally am not getting an Islamist vibe off of him. He's super pro-trans, for example. His mother is Hindu. He, to me, reads like just your garden variety Nepo baby socialist. What am I missing?
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. Linda Sarsour has said that CARE was behind a lot of his campaign. And, you're either a leftist, these are her words, you're either a leftist or you're an Islamist, or maybe she didn't say that, you're for Islam or something, but you can't be both. And they're going to hold his feet to the fire. So I don't know, I know he is a committed Marxist. He believes in that. Where he stands on Islam, I don't know. I just don't like the fact that he is, wanting to globalize the Intifada. That's a big warning sign that he, it doesn't have a bad thing to really say about Hamas.
Yeah.
That's another bad sign. That's not Islam. That's an Islamist that goes to that space, and a very dangerous one. Unfortunately, he's not the only one. I mean, we're seeing it happen, and they're all coming in sheep's clothing all over the West.
It's not just what he says, it's also how the Muslims in New York react to him. And they're very pro Mamdani.
If we don't pay attention, we're in trouble. There was a story I just read this morning, a small town in Germany that has a Christmas, fest that they do every Christmas in this town. And they just stopped it. They've canceled it this year because there is a mosque by the town square that would be offended, and the police said it will cause security concerns, and it will cost more to protect the Christmas market than to run the Christmas market. And so the town had to stop it. I'm really tired of being called a bigot or a racist or not tolerant. I don't have a problem with the mosque. Why are you trying to destroy Christmas? What is your problem? I'm not the one who says, if you don't believe my faith, I can take you as a slave. I'm not the one that says, I can marry a child off at 14, 13. I'm not any of those things. And all of those things are against the Western culture. They are diametrically opposed to Western culture, and I find them evil. I don't believe in cutting people's hands off for stealing. If you do, that's fine. Find a place. The West does not stand with that. And I am afraid there are too many things, too many signs all around that people might say, I'm really not part of that, but they'll play footsies with it. I love the people that are, for trans people, or, for gay rights, and then march with Hamas. You're the first to be killed. You're the first to be killed. So if he's serious, that's trouble. If he's not serious about that, and he's playing footsie with it, he is in trouble. He's in trouble.
Yeah, I think we're really in this moment where people are suddenly realizing that the West is not only worth defending, but in need of defending, the values this country was founded on. I think that's part of the reason that immigration has become the #1 issue in the country politically, certainly for the right. But there's another reason, which is the economic piece of it. And I want to play you this clip from Mamdani's victory speech, and then make the point and see if you agree with me. So let's have that.
Thank you to those so often forgotten by the politics of our city who made this movement their own. I speak of Yemeni bodega owners and Mexican abuelas, Senegalese taxi drivers and Uzbek nurses, Trinidadian line cooks and Ethiopian aunties.
So what to me is so amazing about that clip is that it's all people who are immigrants who are working in these service industry jobs. And to me, it is so emblematic of what the Democratic Party is right now, which is you have sort of rich, overeducated, white, in most cases, progressives who now have built an economy that depends on a slave caste, often of illegal labor, to do jobs that were once jobs that gave working class Americans a dignified life. What did you make of this clip?
I would agree with you on that. I think you left out one part. This upper class, overeducated, white politician or mainstream politician, if you will, as they look, and they rail against the millionaires, and yet they're friends with all the billionaires. I mean, you're getting money from George Soros and Bill Gates and all of the Tides Foundation. And don't talk to me about how you don't like the rich. The rich are calling the shots in your own campaign, in your own life, and I find it reprehensible. The other thing I because I played that clip on the radio the next morning, and the thing I pulled away from is we are back to Teddy Roosevelt's hyphen American speech. That there's no such thing as a hyphen American. You're either an American or you're not. And as he said, I've met people who are naturalized Americans. I've met people who want to be Americans, who are more American than people who are born here in America. They come here for a reason. They understand it's the rights that they didn't have in their country at home, the protections that they had, the ability to break out of the class and be whoever it is they want to be. That every time that a politician starts dividing us into class and into hyphen Americans, you're planting the seeds of our own destruction. E pluribus unum, from many, one. And the one is just, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And governments are instituted among men to protect those rights. That's our one. That's our one. That's what we all came, my family came for in the 1800s. Your family came, and they all came because that was a completely different idea. And it's still.
I just want to add to what he's saying. My ancestry actually fought in not just the Civil War, but the Revolutionary War. And one of my ancestors actually signed the Constitution, was part of the drafting of the Constitution for the New Jersey delegation. Oh, it gets better. See, there are few people in this country that can actually have a direct lineage to the 55 people that actually signed and helped draft the Constitution of the United States. Very few people. Now, the bottom line is this. As socialism continues on, as there's an erosion of our constitutional freedoms, as there is an explosion of the apparatus of the national security state, we are going to lose our constitutional freedoms. And as that happens, there will be in the smoldering landscape few people that will rise up like a phoenix and bring back the constitutional republic. But first, it has to be destroyed because the people, the plebs, are too stupid to even deserve the freedoms that they have.
We're the only, look at Great Britain and how many 4,000 people have been put in jail in the last 24 months. 4,000 people on speech. On speech, we're still a very unique place. That's our one. Come together on that, because I can live side by side with anyone. I don't care how they vote, if they believe in that. I can live next to anyone of any faith, as long as you understand I'm the same as you. We're both children of God. You can call God whatever you want to call God. I'll call God, but I have the same rights and I get them from either the universe or your tree or whatever, but it's a higher power than man and government.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's part of the Enlightenment. That's part of the Enlightenment. Life, liberty, and property. Going all the way back to John Locke. And that there are inalienable rights that are given to our Creator. See, the socialists, the Marxists, the atheists, they want to tear that down. And most of them, not all of them, but most of them are anti-Enlightenment. So we need to push back, but unfortunately there's not enough people that are willing to push back. And it's going to be a slippery slope. And guess what? The country in the future will fail. It will fail. The three branches of government, the weight of stupidity will just crumble the pillars, and that will lead to tyranny. And then in that smoldering mess, there will rise up a few people, the remnants, to reboot it all. Like, we are literally the ancestors. We are living off of the positive effects of our ancestors that were remnants from the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire grew and it had its problems, and then all of a sudden it collapsed. It had a long history, and some people would say the Roman Empire never really fully collapsed. It just morphed and just kind of went dormant, and then eventually became in a different form. But the thing is that the United States is a remnant, and it was rebooted by our founding fathers. But these remnants going all the way back to the Roman Empire. And what broke down Rome? Corruption, the disparity between the have and the have-nots. And earlier in this broadcast, we were talking about the loss of knowledge. Think about all the engineering works that were taking place in the Roman Empire. Mechanical engineering, civil engineering. That was all lost during the fall, during the collapse. And it just took a couple generations, and Western Europe was living in a dark age. Didn't take that long. Just a couple generations. But there was a remnant. One generation after another, just living through the dark ages, and then slowly rebuilding Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire. Right? But there were lines of people, of families that were a remnant, waiting for the time to reboot. There will be the fall of the United States. It's not in our lifetime. But there will be a remnant that takes place to reboot it, just like what happened during the Revolution. Now, what the sad thing is that we're the generation to actually see it slowly getting the country getting corrupted, and seeing our branches of government losing its prowess, losing its ideal, losing its virtue. And it's a slippery slope with this communism, with this socialism, with the income disparity. Now, what is different compared to the fall of the Roman Empire to today is that we have technology that may help circumvent what happened. Now, no one's smart enough to really fully understand when humanoid robots are fully implemented in the workforce, what that means to the value of money, what that means to inflation, what that means to the supply of goods and services, debt burden. No one understands what will happen. Is it a new type of economy? Maybe the whole AI world, if you think of it in a utopic way, will help individuals to really reach their full potential. But we could also go on a path that speeds up the destruction of the new Roman Empire.
How you would advise Republicans who now live in Virginia, who know that their neighbors overwhelmingly voted for somebody who texted about fantasizing about conservatives being killed, their children being killed. I think a lot of people are feeling very betrayed by how their neighbors voted. You brought up Mamdani defending chance to globalize the Intifada. 70% of Jewish Americans living in New York voted against him. They are feeling very betrayed by their neighbors. You are a uniter and not a divider. You've been warning about civil war for 10 years now. What is your advice to people feeling so betrayed by their neighbors' choices?
This is going to sound trite, but it is the only thing that gets me through the day. And I mean, we're an awful lot alike. You do this for a living. I do this for a living. We are paid to look at all of this stuff every day, digest it all, and then select the things that we think are the most important. So there's more than what we talk about that we look at every day, and it's poison for the soul. It's just awful. It's evil. It's awful. The only thing that gets me through is getting up every day and saying, I know these things are true about God. I know that I'm a child of God. We're all children of God, and he loves us. I know those things are true. He loves us, and he's not neutral in the affairs of man. He has it. Everything else, I'm just going to be grateful for. These are not enemies of ours. These are enemies of his. We have to do everything we can to stay on his side. He's never on our side. If you look at the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln talked about it. How is it that both sides can claim God? How in their churches can both sides say God for slavery, God's against slavery? They're both fighting in the same name of the same God. He's not. We have to be humble enough to be on his side. And we've seen, I was very upset after the 2020 election. I didn't think it was a fair election. And I thought, we are doomed. We're doomed. And look what happened. That time gave Donald Trump a season to mature, grow into the president, take a breath and go, okay, what did I just experience? Who are the real enemies? If I had this chance to do it over again for 4 years, what would I do? In that time period where we were all, we're doomed, we're doomed, we're doomed, he was preparing. And if you don't believe that was a miracle that he turned his head, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a bigger miracle than that. He turns his head, clips his ear, and he lives. And now look at what we've had in the last 9 months. God's not neutral in these things. We have to do our part. But the worst thing we can do is sow division, sow hatred, sow distrust. We have to be aware of what's...
You need to be aware of your enemy and kill them. Come on. You need to be aware of your enemy and you got to stop them. You got to be aware of your enemy and you have to hold the line. Stop playing patty cake. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ashwagandha root. Ashwagandha root will bring down your cortisol levels. Sometimes when I listen to Glenn Beck, my cortisol levels go up. So I have to take ashwagandha root. Now, by taking ashwagandha root, you're controlling your cortisol levels and you're also helping your blood glucose level. That's reducing inflammation and you're helping your immune system and your cardiovascular system, because less inflammation means less plaque buildup. Less inflammation means boosted immune system. Elevated cortisol levels will age you. So if you're chronically stressed, if you're chronically watching Glenn Beck and he pisses you off, you're aging faster. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ashwagandha root. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off. Back to Glenn Beck.
Happening around us, we can't hide from it, but we can't play into it, or it'll cripple you.
Welcome back to Bitchute News Nation. Now, more of my conversation with Glenn Beck, where we discuss the GOP infighting, the state of America, and Charlie Kirk's legacy for Glenn personally. So speaking of...
There are sort of two huge issues with AI at the moment. Hi, I'm Tom Goodwin. I'm with teamwork.com, looking at their new report on AI and technology.
So speaking of civil wars, there's also a mini one happening on the right now over Nick Fuentes, whether he should be debated with or not, whether his ideas should be given a hearing or not. You have people saying, basically, our enemy, if you're on the right, your enemy is the left. I don't have any enemies on my right. We need to fight the bad guys on the left. And then you have other people saying, actually, no, it's extremely important to police the kooks from our side, people like Fuentes, who's an avowed white nationalist. It's extremely important to insist that we can be American nationalists who are not white nationalists to protect that multiracial coalition that President Trump built, and to say not Fuentes. Where do you fall in terms of those two camps?
Well, I don't think he's worth anybody's time, quite honestly, because I don't think he actually believes anything. I think he's from this new culture that says the most outrageous things for attention, and I'm not going to give him any attention. I am very clear on anti-Semitism. I am very clear on who and what we should stand for. I am very clear on fascism, communism, authoritarianism, and the U.S. Constitution. So I don't think he's worth debating, because there's no logic behind any of that. It's rage, et cetera, and I think it's performance art. However, know that exists, and that will affect people. So now let's look and take another step back from that. Okay, so people hear that and take it seriously. It's our job to understand, why are they susceptible to that? Why? How is it that anyone with any sense of logic and decency can fall for that? They've been disenfranchised by something. What is that? I think we saw the beginning of this with why Mamdani won, and why the election didn't go. I mean, they never go the Republicans' way or the Democrats' way, whoever the incumbent is. But what was the problem? Why didn't we connect? Because we were still talking about cultural things, and right now, people are afraid for their job. They're afraid they can't make ends meet. Young people, if you grew up and you don't remember 9/11, so you don't remember a world with the airport where you could just walk up to the plane. You don't remember, a time without the Patriot Act. You don't remember a time where the banks weren't getting bailed out by the federal government while your mom and dad are losing their job, or COVID, where your family lost their job, lost everything, and yet Home Depot can be open. But if I owned a true hardware store, I couldn't stay open somehow or another. They were immune, but I wasn't. If that's your framework, and you have grown up in a society where they've said to you as a young man, you're bad, you're the problem, you're racist, You shouldn't even be treated equally. You should be slighted because of your heritage. Communism is neat, socialism is neat, and America is bad. If that's the stew you grew up in, that's why you listen to somebody like that. And we have to understand where they're coming from. We have to meet them where they live, not on our terms, on their terms. And understand that is real. Perception is reality. So that's their real reality, that this is the way things are. We must go in and meet them there. If we don't, we're never going to connect with them. We have to listen first. How did you get there? But only engage with people who are honest. If you ask honest questions and you are honest on both sides, that means I will change my mind if you bring up something that I look at and go, wow, I think you're right on that. Then that means I have to change my position. If I'm not willing to change my position, you've brought up something that should have changed my mind, and I recognize that that's a really good point. It should change my mind, but I'm not moving anywhere because I want to win. Then you're not an honest broker. You're not looking for truth. Only engage with those people who are looking for truth, but you'll only find them if you first come to them and say, how did you get there? What are you thinking? Tie those together, because I can't tie that together.
It sounds like what you're saying is, yeah, that if you tell young men for a decade that they're the problem, they're toxic, they're poisonous, their whiteness is a sin, and their gender is violence, they're going to start to believe you at some point. And finally, I wanted to play you a video that I found while I was preparing for this interview. Let's have that.
Thank you, everybody. More importantly, we have Glenn Bitch here, everybody. I'm not sucking up to Charlie because I just said this to him on my show. This guy holds a lot of the responsibility of the win. A lot of the credit comes to Charlie and what you built. You're fantastic. It is. I will do better receiving that, but it's the Turning Point team that deserves the credit.
So that was, I
man.
assume, the last time you saw Charlie. It was right after the election. What's it like watching that back now?
A couple of things. It's amazing how you don't have awareness of the times that you're living in or the people that you're around sometimes. I mean, if you're standing with, the president, or you're in the Oval Office, you got it. But when you're around somebody who is a peer, like Charlie was, around somebody who's just doing what they do and kind of what you do, you don't necessarily recognize the time you live in and how important what that person is doing, how deeply important that is. I knew that Charlie was different. I had tremendous respect for Charlie. I meant what I said. He was really one of the key reasons why Donald Trump won.
Glenn Beck, God bless and protect you. Thank you so much for joining me.
It's an honor. Anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our news.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and fight the globalists. Fight Mamdani. Fight Marxism and support capitalism by going to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, before New York turns into a total shithole. Get the turmeric. Turmeric will bring down inflammation. And guess what? The socialists are causing a lot of inflammation in society. Bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals. The socialists are radical. Now, turmeric, what this will do is bring down inflammation and free radicals and help to boost up your immune system. And also, when you're bringing down stress, bringing down inflammation, you're helping your endocrine system, you're helping with your brain function. If you're reducing stress around your neurons, you're helping the health of the neuron. and maintaining that myelin sheath so you have good cognition. In addition, by taking turmeric, you're helping your cardiovascular system. By bringing down inflammation at the vascular level and soaking up free radicals, you're reducing plaque formation. So you don't have a heart attack. And guess what? Mamdani is going to give a lot of people heart attacks in New York. So it behooves you to get the turmeric. Now, I also have lignans. Lignans is a great supplement to take to help with your endocrine system and your immune system. Brings down inflammation and sucks up free radicals. And again, by bringing down that inflammation and soaking up those free radicals, you're boosting up that immune system, helping with brain function, helping with your cardiovascular system. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the lignans. Now, a great stack is taking the lignans, the turmeric, and the ashwagandha root as a stack, and that will further slow down the aging process. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5. You get $5 off and help support capitalism and stop supporting Marxism. All right, let's take a look at MSNBC. They just published this 13 minutes ago.
What does it mean to reconnect? To breathe deeper? To feel smaller in the best way?
Millions of Americans may be going hungry as the Trump administration tries to wriggle out of distributing food stamp funds during the shutdown. Last night, the Supreme Court temporarily allowed the Trump administration to withhold about $4 billion in SNAP money. The order was issued by Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who says the temporary decision was required so that the appeals court, lower court, can consider the government's arguments in full. It'll then go back to the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, everyday Americans are struggling with both hunger and financial stress as they become a political football in the shutdown fight. Last month, a nonprofit natural food store in New Jersey posted on social media that it was offering a temporary discount to SNAP participants to help tide them over while their funding had run out. But an hour later, they, along with other stores around the country, received an email from the government telling them that they weren't allowed to do that. Joining us now is MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin and John Leary, the general manager of George Street Co-op in New Brunswick, New Jersey, whose store we just mentioned. So, John, what was your reaction when you got this message from the government saying you could not help SNAP recipients even if you wanted to?
I suppose I went through the stages of grief just very rapidly. So there was a moment of disbelief. There was, surprise. But mostly just shock because they give the legal reason why they refer to the equal treatment rule. And I looked up the rule, and it's very obviously about non-discrimination, which of course everyone at the co-op completely agrees with. But we just never imagined that it would be construed to prevent us from helping people through a specific time of need, especially a specific time of need that was created by government action and inaction.
Why do you think this message was sent out?
Well, I am not entirely comfortable surmising all of the reasons why that might have happened. I do know that this administration has been very strong about trying to avoid anything that's seen as an abuse of the system. And so in the 15 years that I've been general manager of the co-op, we've received very few communications from the government about the SNAP program, except for routine things about like, oh, it's time to renew, it's time to renew your documentation on the program. So we received one communication shortly after the Trump administration took office that basically was put this poster up about fraud. And so we did. And then this communication. So those are the only two communications we've had on issues.
So this is really targeted government intervention, perverting equal opportunity laws on some level. Lisa, can you explain? Because to me, to someone who really values a free market and libertarian, I do not like the government saying how I can operate my business
business. And granted, you're a nonprofit, but still, this seems like a very top-down level of intervention to maybe just for spite. You know, much like, do you remember Meals on
First of all, if you're getting government funds and you're a nonprofit, you have an auditor that comes in to make sure that the clients are getting the required assistance based on whatever the nonprofit is doing relative to the funding. So they usually have an auditor coming in. Sometimes certain programs, it's depending on how big the nonprofit is, quarterly or annually, semi-annually, but they usually have an audit every year or multiple times a year. In addition, there's usually a week, usually monthly, depending on the size of the nonprofit, but usually monthly, where they have to issue the receipts of the program to justify the spending of the grant that was given. So they issue receipts, and then there's also additional audit, typically. That's typically how it works. And the whole idea is that you don't just get some money from the government and then you can spend it any way you want. No, you have to meet the requirements of the grant. And you have to show the receipts. And you have to go through the audit. So what's wrong? If you don't want to go through the audit process and showing the receipts, then don't take the money from the government.
When they were discussing cutting funding the first Trump administration, and the administration said, "Oh well, donors can make up the, you know, your fellow Americans can help feed you," and so that's kind of what you were trying to do.
Most nonprofits, all right. I don't know about his nonprofit, but most nonprofits, what they do is they get either state money, federal money, city money, whatever, and they get a program. They get like some funding. Usually what happens is that it's around 70 to 80 cents on the dollar of funding, and the nonprofit has to make it up in private philanthropy. So in this case, let's say a grant comes in at 80 cents to the dollar being spent for the client, for the one in need, and 20 cents for every dollar has to come from private philanthropy. That's common. That's actually standard procedure in nonprofits. So if the government is saying we don't have the money and we need to cut some of these programs that are going to the nonprofits, so we're going to cut funding, then less people are going to be served. And therefore, the ratio is roughly the same. But if they're going to serve the same number of clients with less government funding, then you're going to have to lean on more private philanthropy. It's that simple. But if you can't get the private philanthropy, you have to cut the number of people that you're serving. That's the way nonprofit works. What's wrong with that?
Hey, Lisa, please explain how this is remotely legal.
Well, I will say that this is the first time that I've heard about the equal treatment rule as it pertains to EBT beneficiaries, because most people don't experience what John experienced. The equal treatment rule was likely devised to prevent SNAP recipients from being discriminated against as they try to use their benefits, from having fancy grocery stores essentially say to people, "You're not wanted here, your dollars are not good here," which is why when you go in various neighborhoods, many people make an effort to conspicuously post, "We take EBT." Right? That is supposed to be the threshold of trying to provide that equal opportunity. But I think what's going on here is that somebody is taking the plain language of a regulation and sort of transmogrifying it onto their own policy priorities and objectives. It seems like this administration doesn't really have much of an understanding of who SNAP recipients are, particularly vis-a-vis the people they know and they prefer. There seems to be sort of a demification, almost a demonizing of people who need government assistance with respect to their nutrition and just.
there's got to be a lot of corruption going on with SNAP. And unfortunately, I think the illegals are getting SNAP too. And if that, so why should American taxpayers be paying for illegal aliens to eat? Why? Why? They're here illegally. American taxpaying dollars should not support their health care or their living expense or their food costs, period. Now, in addition, if individuals are having problems transiently and they need help with SNAP, then that's okay. But when it comes to become habitual, then maybe they need to leave the high cost area that they're living in. Now, during the COVID years in New York, SNAP recipients increased. So I would say that there's two problems coming on here. There is corruption in the system using money that could be, the corruption is going to individuals that shouldn't be getting these programs. And they're taking away precious funds to help the people that are in need that legitimately should be getting the services. But the other problem is that there's too much of a reliance of society on government assistance. This is not sustainable. This goes back to the job market and people getting plugged in. You need to have the economic cluster to get people to be working, to be productive citizens and not rely on the government. Well, if you keep on shipping the jobs overseas and not willing to bring back the manufacturing, guess what? You don't have the economic clustering, you don't have the jobs, and therefore you have more people on SNAP. So the real issue here is bring back the economic clustering.
Being food insecure. And I'm not sure that the people who work in this White House or this USDA really know who those people are.
I don't think it's indifference. I think it's about basically making low-income people political football so that this administration can get more leverage, I think, to get Democrats to cave on their other priorities in this shutdown. I don't think it's about like, oh, we don't know who these people are. I mean, maybe they don't. I don't know.
Well, when I say we don't know who these people are, what I mean is these aren't our people. We don't care about these people, okay? And so that is what justifies making them the political football. But when I say we don't know who these people are, they don't identify with people who receive SNAP. And as a result of that, it's sort of like, you place them at a level not equal to yourself that justifies preventing people like John from doing.
It's about economics. You don't need social programs if you have a vibrant economy.
Part of the public service that he was trying to do.
John, I want to ask if you can describe for our audience what the families that you feed are dealing with right now. What it's like for them, what you've heard from them as they've come into your doors, if they've asked you questions about what the coming days are going to look like. I can imagine that, I'm guessing that this discount you were trying to offer, you were going to shoulder that burden. You weren't asking the government to do that.
No, we were not even at the point of trying to fundraise or anything for it. It was just something that we were simply going to do within the organization to make it possible. Just over 5% of our customers are EBT users. And I can tell you that, even customers who are not using EBT lately, there's concern. I mean, and on your program, of course, you touch on many of the issues that come up at our register too, which is that, there are lots of signs that the economy is teetering on the brink. There's lots of folks who are having a lot more trouble making ends meet. And so whether EBT recipients or not, that I'm definitely seeing people come into the store. And, we are a small shop. We're the type of place where people know our names and we know their names. So they'll tell me what's going on. And I can definitely tell you that, I've been the manager for 15 years. Over the course of that period of time, there is definitely a pall that has been cast over a lot of people's lives in recent years. It's I thought that when the pandemic ended, maybe we would be coming out of a lot of that, but that hasn't happened to the degree that I think any of us were hoping.
Lisa, can you help us understand Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's decision here? Why did she decide to do this? What are the possible outcomes of this temporary stay?
This is probably one of the more legally complicated things that I've ever had to explain, but let's start with we know you can do it. I appreciate it. Well, let's start with the fact that Ketanji Brown Jackson made this decision by herself last night, and we are not accustomed to seeing justices act on their own. The reason she does that is that each federal appeals court in the country has a justice that sort of acts as the circuit justice for that circuit where there are emergency applications. Usually that person will refer it out to the full court. Last night, Ketanji Brown Jackson, perhaps because of the time exigency, but also perhaps because she wanted to shape what was happening, decided this on her own. And what she decided was, I'm going to let this Court of Appeals make a decision about whether or not to stay the decision to compel SNAP benefits for November over the long term as the appeal is pending. But in the meantime, I'm going to grant a very limited administrative stay for a couple of days, assuming that the First Circuit acts. And the reason I'm going to do that is because if I don't do that, you can't unring the bell. It would essentially move the government's ability to appeal it. If she did nothing, right, then the money would have to go out the door and the government's ability to appeal that judgment would no longer be something that they could even do. So she's granting them a very limited stay on that judgment. At the same time, I think she's trying to impose some order here. Think about this administration and many presidential administrations, and they're not alone in this, have started to leapfrog courts of appeals when they don't like decisions of district courts and go immediately to the Supreme Court for a rescue. She is basically saying, stop doing this. Go through the normal order. You have an appeals court that told you it will consider your application for a pause of that order pending your appeal. It intends to do so. It told you it would do so rapidly. Trust them. I'm going to.
John, could you talk a little bit about what your organization has been doing, given that you've sort of had your hands tied and you haven't been able to, do the plan A was giving people a discount. As we've been discussing, you've been prevented from doing that. Are there other things that your organization is doing or that you think other organizations in your position should be doing to help out people who are struggling?
One of the remarkable things that happened as a result of this post that we made and then the retraction is that a lot of other organizations throughout the country have been in touch with us. So I've been on conference calls with coalitions of co-ops and I've been in conversation with general managers of other co-ops. And it seems like there's a family of ideas that a lot of different co-ops are exploring. But it basically boils down to like the problem with eliminating the particular thing we were trying to do is it was very precise. It was, you're an EBT holder. There is now a problem with EBT. Let's tailor this to EBT holders. Now we have to either come up with our own regime in which we check out people's documentation and suddenly go into a realm of analyzing people's lives that we never really wanted to, or we try to find some way to open it up for everyone and offer a benefit to everyone. And nobody, of course, is opposed to offering a benefit to everyone, but we're a very small co-op. There's a lot of very small co-ops who are being touched by this. And the ability of a small co-op to just completely change our markup regime is somewhat limited, nor can we afford phalanxes of lawyers to, try and craft policy for us. So that's the real difficulty. George Street Co-op has not decided what exactly we're going to do about this, but we are going to do something about it because we do believe that even if this, Supreme Court, all of this gets settled, we do think that there are going to be other circumstances coming down the pike that are of equal concern.
Lisa Rubin, thank you for helping us make sense of all of this. And John Larry, thank you for what you do and the support that you have and are trying to provide for your community.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
The issue isn't giving money or helping people that are in need long term. The issue is building a more sustainable society, and that's through economics. If you don't get to the root cause of the problem, you're not going to solve it. And just giving benefits away, SNAP benefits away, that's not solving the problem. That's a stopgap. It should be used as a stopgap for sure, 100%. But if it's habitual, then the society has bigger problems, and it needs to make sure that the economy is robust and it's hiring people. That's the only way out of poverty. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the C60. You can get an extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, an MCT coconut oil. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. You take it on an empty stomach, preferably, for best absorption. Take a teaspoon a day every day. And what this will do is soak up free radicals, bring down stress in the cell, and your cell will perform better. You'll have healthier mitochondria, you'll have more energy, more ATP. Your immune system will improve, your endocrine system will improve, your brain function will improve, and your cardiovascular system will improve. Please go to my store, take a teaspoon a day every day. And what you'll notice within 2 months that your body is performing better, you have more energy, and your immune system is better, your endocrine system is better, you're getting rid of that brain fog and you're thinking better, you're increasing your neuroplasticity, you're getting positive neuroplasticity. And in about 1 year, you'll start to notice you look younger. If you compare yourself before and after in a 1 year period, taking this every day, you're going to look younger. Why? Your basal layer will improve because you're soaking up free radicals and improving the health of that basal layer for your skin and producing healthier skin. In addition, with better immune system and endocrine system, your body is performing better. You get better blood flow because your cardiovascular system is better. So these are all positive things that helps you with the aging process. So you're slowing down the aging process and you will visibly look younger. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take a teaspoon of this every day. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. That's the end of my broadcast. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 to get $5 off any order. Stack these different supplements like I told you to, and you'll slow down the aging process. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.